This meeting to order. The time is 8:22 a.m. Today is Wednesday, November 15, 2016. This is day one of the Physical Therapy Board of California. We're meeting in the California Endowment at the Cabrillo Room located at 1000 North Alameda Street in Los Angeles. Could we please have roll call?
Katarina Elvey.
Present.
Alicia Ruben-Amen.
Will be here shortly. She is in traffic.
Deborah Alviso.
Present.
Jesus Dominguez.
Present.
Daniel Drummer.
I'm here.
Tanya McMillian.
Will be here shortly. She is in traffic.
TJ Watkins.
Will be here shortly. He is in traffic.
All members are present and the board has a quorum. All members are present with the exception of 3 and the board has a quorum.
Thank you, Brooke. This morning, we're going to get started with agenda item number 3, the review and approval of October 25th's meeting minutes. Brooke, would you like to walk us through page by page, please?
Of course. So these are the minutes from the October 25th, 2016 meeting. Did the board have any edits on page 9 of the PDF? Did the board have any edits on the first page? Second page? Third page of the meeting minutes?
Okay, I move to adopt the, wait, okay.
You know what? I just wondered if it's number 4 on the third page, the public comment on items not on the agenda. Should we note the CPTA comments that came forward, or are they somewhere else in the minutes?
I don't think we listed those. We can add them there in that section.
They probably should.
Thanks, Deb.
I'm wondering to approve the minutes if we should kind of try to capture that idea.
We can bring them forward in the
Okay.
28th meeting.
Any additional comments from other members? Okay, well, we'll revisit these minutes in February. Oh, actually, our meeting in November, end of November. Okay, so let's move forward to the Administrative Services Report, agenda item number 5. This is on.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Liz Constancio, Admin Manager for PTBC, reporting on the budget report. The information that was provided in the material today is statistical data that's relevant to the budget activities for this current fiscal year, 2016-17, and also provides for the previous fiscal year, 2015-16. On attachment 1, I will kind of just highlight some information in regards to the revenues. So the revenue report reflects all revenues that are collected for the first quarter. This report shows that the PTBC collected $1,592,000 in revenues for this current fiscal year, and then $1,091,807 for the previous fiscal year. In comparing the two, PTBC revenues increased approximately 45% over the previous fiscal year. Sorry. And so the primary source of revenue for 16-17 was the license renewal fees, which was $1,249,299,000, and then followed by initial application and licensing fees, which was $275,408,000. So pretty much the primary source of revenues for this current fiscal year was consistent with previous fiscal year, being the license renewal fees being the primary source of revenue. And if the board members had any questions regarding the charts for revenues. If not, I was going to go over the expenditures report. Okay. So for attachment 3, the expenditure statistics report, this current fiscal year, 16-17, the PTBC was authorized a budget allotment of $5,244,000, which provides $1,902,000 for personnel services and $3,322,000 for operating expenses and equipment, OE&E. The expenditure report reflects all expenditures for the first quarter, again, and shows that PTBC spent $494,622,000 in personnel services, $614,254 in OE&E for the total expenditure, the $1,108,876,000. In comparison to the previous fiscal year, 15-16, the expenditures increased by approximately, 23% over 15-16. Whoops.
I don't want to interrupt you, but is there any major places that occurred?
For expenditures? Sorry.
The increase by 23%?
No, it's as year to date. So it would be everything total.
But as you look back to 15-16, is it pretty evenly, did all areas have increases, or was it any particular reason?
I think just the natural growth. I mean, they're pretty consistent. For example, just looking at personnel services, going from year to date, the $404,000, and then current fiscal year, $494,000, obviously the growth. But no, for me, there's not this huge significant increase in expenditures. I anticipate for the expenditures to be a little bit more significant in certain areas, with the PTBC receiving the 3 additional positions this fiscal year. So you'll see the increase in the personnel services, for example, next quarter. So no really significant increases in a particular area right now. So right now the PTBC projects a reserve level of 4.2 months, the end of this fiscal year. And that could change depending on the revenues that are collected.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Down in the enforcement expenditures, it looks like, if I'm reading it right, from 15-16 was 149,000 at this point, and then this year's 242. Do those kind of roll in at different times?
Yeah, that number's constantly in flux. That particular line item is for DOI, so Division of Investigation. So that definitely could be affected by investigations that have been running over one fiscal year and into another.
Okay.
So there's no real way to kind of look at that as a trend line other than just that it's a trend line. There's no empirical data that says where an increase occurs.
You'd have to look at bigger
Yeah.
time frames. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And so for the expenditures, there's also the measures report. And if you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer any.
There are a couple things on the expenditure list that I could kind of point out as just as an example of that flow. So while D of I has increased quite a bit, if you look up at the Attorney General's line item, It's almost half of what it was this time last year. But that just kind of talks about how there's this ebb and flow between those two parties. As the investigations come to close and those cases are then shifted over to AG, you'll see those numbers shift. So, and then for expenditures, one of the other things to note is under personnel services, you'll see a significant increase, which is represented by additional staff.
Do any other members have any other questions? No? Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I have one more. So at this point, at the 1 quarter, which is what you've got now, anything that you have a concern about for, as it's kind of lining up to look at annually? Anything have your attention that you're either watching or have a concern about it being able to stay on budget?
I do not at this time. It actually, it looks good.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can add to that a little bit. The first quarter report actually let me exhale a little bit. It's the first time in a long time that we've actually seen revenues exceed expenditures. So,
So Jason, are there any other agenda items that we can take care of while we still have other members in transit? No? Is there any public comment on the budget report? Thank you.
the other item that you might be able to address, but I think it would be important to have the other members in the room, is just adopting the proposed meeting calendar. We have it fairly locked down, but it would be a good idea to have them present.
I'm going to wait for them. Yeah. So do you want to go into a brief recess?
I think that's appropriate.
So we're going to recess for about 25 minutes or so. We'll be back closer to about 9 a.m. Thank you. Okay, we are back from recess. The time is 9:06 a.m. We're going to get started with a special order of business, agenda item number 6, the petition for modification of probation or termination of probation for Nolan John Arrieta.
All right, is Mr. Arrieta? All right, and you are Mr. Arrieta?
Yes.
All right. We are on the record in the matter of the petition for termination of probation filed by Nolan John Arrieta, OAH case number 2016-100404. Today is November 16, 2016. My name is Erlinda Schrenger. I am an administrative law judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings. I have been assigned to sit with the Physical Therapy Board, which is convened here today to consider this petition. May I have the appearances of counsel and the parties for the record, starting with the Attorney General's office.
Good morning, Your Honor, and board members. Brian Bill, a Deputy Attorney General on behalf of the people of the state of California.
And may I have the petitioner please state his name for the record?
Yes, Nolan John Arrieta.
All right. In addition to this case, we have 2 other petitions on the record, and I understand that the other 2 petitioners are here in the hearing room. Those are, let's see, Mr. James and Ms. Jump. Are you here?
Yes.
Okay. What I'm going to do is, at this point, give some basic instructions on the hearing. So I would like you, as well as Mr. Arrieta, to listen to them, and then I'll just ask you when it's time for your hearing if you remember the instructions, so that way I don't have to repeat them 3 times. So since all petitioners are present, let me just briefly explain what the process is for today's hearing. I am the administrative law judge. I will be conducting the hearing here today, but I do not vote on the petitions. Only board members who are present for the hearing are allowed to vote. The burden of proof is on each petitioner to establish that they are entitled to the relief being sought in their petitions. The Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Bill, will present the jurisdictional documents first, which is basically your petition and any attachments to the petition. Each board member has been given a copy or will be given a copy of the petition packets, and they have reviewed them prior to this hearing. They'll also review any new documentation and information presented today at today's hearing. During your presentation for the petitioners, you don't need to or just try not to repeat any information that you've already submitted to the board. They've already seen it. But I think you should focus on anything that's not in the petition, the documentary materials already submitted. During the course of the hearing, board members may ask petitioners questions. Please pay attention to the questions and make sure you answer the questions directly. After the hearing is concluded, the board will go into closed session and hold their deliberations on each petition. And so the decision of the board on each petition will not be announced today. A written decision will be mailed to each petitioner. Okay, and Mr. Arrieta, since you are the first petitioner here today, do you have any questions on anything I've explained?
No.
Okay, then we will proceed with the presentation by the Attorney General's office. Mr. Bill, go ahead.
Your Honor, do you want me to proceed with opening?
Yes, do you wish to give a short summary?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Your Honor and board members, we're here today to decide whether or not petitioner Arrieta is entitled to a reduction of penalty, specifically the early termination of his probation. In this case, Mr. Arrieta was placed on probation with the board after sustaining 2 separate DUI-related convictions. He was placed on probation in October 2013, and it's scheduled to terminate in October 2017. Thank you.
All right, and Mr. Jones, you did present to me a copy of the petition in this binder.
Shall I go ahead and mark the documents for identification for the record?
Yes, Your Honor, and I believe that Mr. Arrieta and I have stipulated that the documents in the trial binder may be admitted as evidence.
Is that correct, Mr. Arrieta?
Yes.
All right. Then let me just, for the record, go ahead and mark for identification as Exhibit 1, the certificate of licensure. I'll go ahead and mark for identification as Exhibit 2, the petition for reduction of penalty. I will mark for identification as Exhibit 3, the petition for reduction of penalty report. Next, I'll mark for identification as Exhibit 4, the notice of hearing. And finally, I'll mark as Exhibit 5, the acknowledgement of receipt and agreement to appear. Per the stipulation of the parties, those 5 exhibits are admitted. Anything else, Mr. Bill?
No, Your Honor.
All right. And now, Mr. Arrieta, do you wish to address the board?
I do.
Go ahead.
Okay, I prepared a statement today. Good morning, and I'd like to thank everybody for your time here today. I really appreciate everybody's time, and Monty Martin's time. I got a chance to meet him, and he's been my advocate for 3 years, and I just can't be more thankful and grateful for his help. So I'd like to start by thanking you all for putting me on probation, because you've saved my life as a physical therapist and perhaps my life as I know it, and I'm deeply grateful for that. The purpose of my request, as you know, is to show that I am rehabilitated and that I no longer require, official excuse me, that I no longer am a significant risk to the people of the state of California. During this meeting, I hope to show you 3 things: that I've demonstrated significant recovery over the past 3 years, that I'm significantly rehabilitated, which is ongoing and a lifelong process, and 3, I'm no longer a risk to public safety, no longer on probation. So I'd like to briefly elaborate some of those items, and pardon me if I duplicate some of the things that have already been submitted, but my rehabilitation over the past 3 years has been thorough and ongoing. I've attended hundreds of AA meetings where I've held service positions such as newcomer chair, birthday coordinator, coffee maker, and I regularly attend AA business meetings as well. I try to give...
I'm sorry, Your Honor, would you like to swear in Mr. Arrieta?
Oh.
This seems to be bordering on testimony.
You're right.
Sorry, I didn't know if that was my opening
Okay,
statement time or not.
Okay. Let me go ahead and swear in the petitioner. Can you please raise your right hand?
Sure.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And do you make that same, take that same oath as to the matters you've just testified to?
Yes.
All right. Go,
Yes.
and you can continue.
Okay.
And thank you, Mr. Bill.
I'm pretty close to being done. So I've attended these meetings in Pleasant Hill and Danville, California at a frequency of 3 days a week, at minimum. And I've also attended approximately 128 health professional support group meetings with Jim O'Donnell, marriage and family therapist, who led most of those sessions in Oakland, California. I have participated in the Maximus Diversion Program. During that time, I've submitted over 130 clean random urine collections. I'm currently under the transition phase of Maximus, of which 2 years of continuous sobriety is a prerequisite, and I am set to graduate from the program in 3 months. I have also attended an 8-hour course on developing a personal relapse prevention plan in Lincoln, California with Mary Haggerty, registered nurse. This course introduced me to the Gorski Relapse Prevention Therapy Workbook. These classes and this workbook have taught me to be more aware of my thinking, feeling, and behavior patterns. They have helped me identify early warning signs or triggers and to avoid high-risk situations, help me stay on the right track. My primary reason for wanting early termination of probation is that I'd love to open my own practice someday. It's been a lifelong goal, and I'm currently looking into opening an outpatient orthopedic clinic in one of 2 underserved Bay Area locations, Brentwood and Danville primarily. My secondary reason is my commitment to recovery. I feel I'm ready to practice physical therapy safely without restrictions. However, I'm not in control of this decision at the moment. I have learned in my AA program that there's a lot more in life that I'm powerless of over other than alcohol, And that notion has helped me a lot in the past 3 years, and it continues to help me every day. I'm currently on step 1 for the 4th time working the steps of AA. When we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. This is my favorite step because it was a difficult hurdle to overcome as my sponsor and I explored the language of the step and how it relates to my life. After looking at my license restrictions, probation, tens of thousands of dollars I've spent on these offenses, it was easy to see from that perspective that life was certainly unmanageable with alcohol in the picture. I also really enjoy step 12, which states, having had a spiritual awakening of these steps, we try to carry these messages to other alcoholics and practice these principles in all of our affairs. I really like this step because it feels like a sense of accomplishment once completing this step, and it appeals to me as a caregiver because it's now our turn to carry the message to help other fellow alcoholics. That is why I was newcomer chair at my home group for 18 months. I like greeting those new to AA, as I feel I can be of service to listen to those in need, denial, and are often desperate for help and guidance. I was there once, and I really enjoy helping those folks in need as I once was, and continue to be.
All right, thank you, Mr. Arrieta.
Thanks.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Arrieta?
Yes, Your Honor, just a few. Good morning, Mr.
Morning.
Arrieta. You sustained your first DUI in 2003, is that right?
Correct.
And then your second DUI related in 2012, is that correct?
Correct.
And the stipulation that you signed with the board to place you on probation, that was signed September 13th, 2013, is that correct?
That's correct.
Between your conviction date and the date that you signed the stipulation, that was about a year, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Between that time, were you drinking or did you abstain from alcohol?
I abstained fully on the day that I got the decision. That was my sobriety date, September 13th, 2013.
So between the date that you were convicted, 10/11/12, and the date you signed your stipulation, did you drink?
Occasionally, but it didn't really hit. My rock bottom was the date that I got that in the mail.
Okay.
It was really, that was what I was considered my rock bottom in AA.
When you got what in the mail?
When the decision and order came.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, going through the documents in the petition, you had a letter of recommendation drafted by Ellen Gendelman, is that right?
My supervisor, yes.
Okay, and you read that letter?
Yeah.
Okay, and in that letter, Ms. Gendelman describes your mindset as being upset about being on probation initially, is that right?
Well, and at first, I think everybody's in denial. You know, you just don't think it's, that you were wronged, and, it doesn't seem like, I'll make it for me, I didn't take ownership of it until, going through the steps, and that's part of working the steps, and that's part of recovery.
At what point did you fully accept, or at what point did you, did that anger and frustration with being on probation, when did that go away?
Well, I think it's a process. I think the Gorski Relapse Prevention workbook and going through that with my sponsor, taking that course like I did, that started to, recognize these triggers, early warning signs. I had no idea that a fear of failure in college led me to drink. I would be studying for something and I'd be so fearful of failing Chemistry 101 exam that I would drink to subside the fear of failure. I had no idea that until October 2014. So what's that, 17 years later, something like that?
So in October 2014, that's when you started to truly accept probation. Is that fair to say?
I'd say working the steps starting in October of 2013, and it's a process from there on. There's just not one date you wake up and say, yes, I've accepted this whole thing, and as you work the steps, that's how it slowly, that's rehabilitation.
So it was a gradual process?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you participated, or you continue to participate in the board's drug and alcohol monitoring program, is that
Yes.
right? And what is that?
So that includes random urine collections. That includes Maximus. Right now, I have to just report to Maureen Keating, registered nurse for the Maximus Diversion Program. If everything goes well, I am set to graduate from that in February 9th, specifically, of this next year. So that's exciting. I have completed, like I think I mentioned, 128 approximately health support group meetings. So that was 2.5 years of going to Oakland 1 or 2 times a week. So once I entered transition in Maximus, they no longer require that. So that was good. I got to spend some extra time with my son.
What is the transition phase in the program?
The prerequisite is 2 years of being clean and sober, and that's a year-long process. I entered into it on the 9th of February this year.
Okay. And the transition phase lasts about a year, is that
Yes,
correct?
1 year.
All right. I have nothing further.
All right, I'll now ask the board members if they have any questions. We'll start with Ms. Ellaby.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you describe your support system that you have around you that you rely on in case you were to have an urge to drink again?
My sponsor, Todd, he's been with me for 3 years. He's great. I have other, members of the AA community I could call. Chris would be my number 2. My family is great. However, I wouldn't probably call my mother because she still doesn't think I have a problem. And so that's not probably a good call to make. So she's still probably in that denial phase somewhere. But that's okay. That doesn't mean that, it just means that I wouldn't make that call to her. So other, I had a talk with Ellen Gendelman about, there were hours during the day that I asked to be off. And then she asked, well, why do you need all these hours off? I'm like, well, I needed to go to a meeting. And so she was happy when I asked her that, that's where I chose to go. So I have developed a good support system, and I'm really thankful. All my colleagues have been extremely supportive. So I'm really lucky.
Thank you. And my last question is,
Yeah.
Regarding your leadership roles at AA, do you plan to continue those once your probation has been, or if your probation is terminated?
Yeah, I am. I want to be a sponsor here. I was told I have to be done with Maximus before I'm a sponsor myself. So I'm just, doing the service positions. In the business meetings is where we vote on who does what, So that's, I'm going to continue to do that for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Alviso, any questions?
You mentioned the relapse prevention.
Yes.
And the warning signs.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned, what you've identified, and then what your action plan is?
So my action plan is to call my sponsor if I have any of these triggers or early warning signs, go to a meeting, communicate, talk about what my feelings are. If I have a fear of failure, something like that. Use my support system. So that seems to work really well. And then go to a meeting when you need it. And just talk through things, when you're sad and glad, mad or angry.
Okay. So are those your warning signs?
Mary Haggerty said when you're faced with the stress, identify which of those it makes you, and then go from there. So that was a good tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just to follow up,
Yeah.
can you explain how
Sure.
GLAD would be a stressor?
Yeah. Well, there's something in A they call a pink cloud. When you think you're just above it all, and a lot of people. I try not to be overly rehabilitated, if that's a word. That, there's. I think that if somebody says they are completely, totally, 100% chance there's no way they're ever going to relapse, I think that's a lie. I think there's the fact of the matter that we have a disease, and it's something we have to always manage. You can get on that pink cloud, as they call it in AA, and think all of a sudden you don't have a problem anymore, and that's the first, it's a problem. So,
Okay, I appreciate that.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Drummer, any questions?
I do, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for taking the step to come and talk to us.
Oh,
And-
my pleasure.
And to sit in front of us and present your life, present the struggles that you've been going through. Can you go over with us now, what are the meetings, the support groups, the things that you attend on a regular basis?
So AA 3 times a week, and meeting with my sponsor 1 to 2 times a week, depending on our schedules. We read the big book mainly. He has us go through a step per month. That's kind of the regimen and frequency. On the first step for the 4th time now. So that's the other thing. I think you got to keep going. I mean, some people think you hit step 12 and you're just done. You know, it's an ongoing thing. So.
Okay, and in your letter, your petition, you mentioned, and earlier today, you mentioned a health support group.
Yes.
Is that part of your recovery?
Well, that was something that I did 1 to 2 times a week for 2.5 years. When I entered into the transition phase of Maximus, I was no longer required to do that, and that was pretty good timing because I had a son born with special needs 2 months later. So I used that time just time to be with my infant son, and 3 times a week with AA and work with the sponsor. It's a lot on the plate with wife and kids and everything. So.
And following that thought,
Yes.
you've talked about wanting to open a private practice.
Right.
And that's stressful by itself.
I know.
But facing that in our current economic environment, healthcare environment, everything else that may be coming is going to be a little extra.
I know.
How are you preparing for that?
Well, I'm a big fan of no commute if I can. I had lived 3 blocks away from my physical therapy clinic I work at now for 12 years, and that was great. I moved with my wife. We sold our respective houses, and we bought a house in Danville. That's why one of the reasons that Danville looks so good, because they actually closed down an outpatient practice there recently, and that lack of a commute would be a great thing. That's that's the tip of the iceberg, I know, but I've been working in a private practice for the past 13 years in various capacities, and I'm just ready. I'm ready to make a change. I could look for another job or make a change, but I certainly couldn't open up my own practice with the restrictions, and I would like that opportunity.
And then just one last question about, we're going to consider whether or not to terminate your probation according to your request today, but you still have until February to complete the transition program.
Correct.
With Maximus. And so that's a concern for me, that you still have some time that needs to be completed to get through that program, but you're considering, or you want us to consider this. So I'm wondering, what can you tell me to help reassure me that this is going to be a good move to make?
Regardless of your decision here and whatever is rendered, I would complete that program. I'm a big fan of finishing things. So I don't want to, I've come so far, why quit 2.5, 3 months before, I'm supposed to graduate? That doesn't make any sense to me. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Mr. Dominguez?
Good morning, Mr.
Morning.
Arrieta. Again, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I had one question. With your current probationary status, you're prohibited from supervising assistants and
Right.
aides. I wonder if you could speak to us a little bit about but I assume that when you are with your supervising PT, they are also present in the clinic. Could you speak to us a little bit about your relationship with assistants or aides that may also be at the work site?
So it's really humbled me to do all the work myself, which means, bringing every hot pack, every cold pack, every patient unrelated task. So it's practicing a different sort of patient regimen. My relationship with Ellen is great. She's also, firm, which is good to have as a supervisor as well. I've told Monty that she needs an award because she's actually undergoing a chemotherapy right now and making herself available so I can work. And that's, I've never seen that sort of a parallel in a profession. Just so she's fulfilling her commitment to me in just an extreme way, and I'm deeply grateful for that. So other aides, assistants, they've just been really, really supportive because they know my restrictions and they've been great. So one of my ideas for opening up that practice is to make it the same, like more of a franchise, open it up, have the same name, Alhambra Valley Physical Therapy, kind of extend over, have some of those same assistants if they want to work, at a different place, a couple days a week. That was another idea I have. So, yeah, we have a good thing going.
So if we had the opportunity to hear from them, what do you think they might have told us about you and your compliance with probation?
I think they've all would say that I've been 100% compliant with probation, and that Eric Tristan, who also gave a report there, he's been extremely supportive. So yeah, I think that they'd all have good things to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Rabina Amen, do you have any questions?
Good morning, Ms.
Good morning.
Jarrett. I read your statement, and I want to thank you for that. I think it was very humbling,
Thank you.
very honest, and gave me a good insight to how far you've come
Thanks.
to this point. Sure. My concern is along the lines of Dr. Drummer's. You have completed about 3 years and 2 months so far of the discipline order, and you're not yet finished with the transition phase. The order is 4 years probation or the program +1, which means you'd be done September 2018. So I wonder if you could give us any justification or any information that will help us make a decision to grant you an early termination when our mandate is to protect the consumers
Sure.
of California.
So my answer is that my rehabilitation is thorough and ongoing. No matter what decision is rendered today, I will accept it, and life will not really change too much for me. So it's not a huge concern of mine if it's yes or no today. I just wanted to plead my case. There's some things with the license with a license under restrictions that I cannot do that I'd like to do. So that's my main reason of flying down here this morning, and I really appreciate your time. Ultimately, it's your decision. So if either way, my life, like I said, isn't going to change. I'd like to open up a practice someday. I'd like to be able to run our clinic more efficiently because I have to run around like a chicken with my head cut off sometimes doing everything. That's fine. But, I think I've really come a long way. I don't think I have anything else to add, really. Yeah.
And Mr. Watkins, questions?
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
First, I want to thank you for showing up in your life and also acknowledge, what you've gone through. And when I read the part in the whole case about you having to provide a eulogy at your father's funeral, and then actually moving through that without alcohol, that was, if stress is a trigger for you, that should have triggered something.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to acknowledge that because there's something interesting that I saw, that you did not get from the case, the reading material, was you knew that the stress was a trigger. And then you come here this morning and you say it was the trigger to the fear of failure. And that was more interesting to me, my background, because that fear of failure was the root of the issue that you obviously understand. So I have a question.
Yes.
You've got a young son, Bo, and you said his special needs, which is not also documented. So that is at times stressful.
Sure.
And you showing up in your new form, you don't need alcohol to manage the stress anymore. So my question is this. Knowing that the stress is a trigger to the fear of failure, do you spend most of your time focusing on managing the stress, or recognizing how that fear of failure is triggered now by other things? Because then stress only becomes one trigger.
Right. All I can say is that it's when I feel like I have these triggers that are potential warning signs, then I need to go to a meeting. I need to call my sponsor. It's just ongoing work. It's something that you can't let go, or you get into a potentially bad spot. So I've successfully managed them so far, and I don't think I'll need recovery in the future as far as formal probation and formal Maximus diversion program to manage these triggers. I think I'm at a point now where I can take the reins on my own and manage them, on my own with the community.
Also, another question. At what point did this gratitude that you're demonstrating, that is, very authentic, at what point, if you started off, being very angry and upset about being in the program, at what point did that trigger where it all flipped and turned into gratitude for you?
Well, in 2003, I was in complete denial. I just thought I didn't sleep enough before I got in the car the next morning. It was just excuse after excuse. Even after 2012, it was just a matter of circumstances and why, if it wasn't for this or that, I would have been fine. But, a mentor of mine, Bob, he says sometimes medical practitioners, it's not hitting rock bottom, the bottom comes up and hits us. And I remember him saying that a couple years back. And it really hit home for me when, decision and order, all these things I got. And was my rock bottom. It really was. Everybody has a different rock bottom. But the good part of that is it finally started getting me out of the denial phase, which that didn't just happen in a day. It took months and years. So that's it. That's why I really thank you for putting me on probation, because there would have been another time, and then I would have been no longer a physical therapist, and I would have been some used car salesman somewhere, guaranteed. So I thank you, and now I get to practice what I've studied for a long time, and I think I'm pretty good at it, and I think I help a lot of people. And that's, I can also help people now that are addicted to drugs and alcohol. That's kind of a neat thing. I would have no idea how to handle some of these people that are addicted to, prescription medications and come in there and they're handling their pain with alcohol. Because I did that once. I didn't know how harmful, how much of a downward spiral you can get into. And so I really love helping those people, directing them to a meeting, trying to get them to, get a sponsor, things like that. It's really a blessing. So.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your emotional honesty. I absolutely appreciate that there's some other element that you tapped in this program, which was the reason, the intention of the program, was that you discover more about yourself. And I see that, and I want to acknowledge that.
Thanks.
So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, that's it for questions from the board. Mr. Arrieta, you didn't bring any witnesses here with you today?
No.
Okay. And does the Deputy Attorney General wish to make any other statement to the board?
Just a closing statement, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. This case is not about punishing Mr. Arrieta. It's not about holding him back. It's about ensuring public protection. And I think at this point, granting the petitioner's request would be premature, given that Mr. Arrieta has not completed all the requirements, specifically the board's drug and alcohol monitoring program. He's scheduled to complete that in February. So I think for that reason, I would ask the board to deny the request. But also, I'm concerned about the length of time it took for Mr. Arrieta to fully accept his underlying issues, to fully accept the course of probation. It didn't happen the day that he signed the petition, the stipulation. It happened slowly thereafter. And so if rehabilitation is a state of mind, I would submit to you that that because of that slow acceptance of his issues, that he has not been on true probation for 3 years. Additionally, I'd like to point out to the board that after the 2012 conviction, Mr. Arrieta still continued to drink. Apparently, I don't know if he sought treatment, but it sounds like the beginning of the treatment, at least treating the underlying issues, didn't start until he signed the stipulation. So I would submit to the board that because of that, for that reason, he should be held to the agreement that he made initially, and he should remain on probation to ensure public safety. I think that Mr. Arrieta has come a long way, and I think that he deserves congratulations. But I believe in order to protect the public interest, he should remain on probation. Additionally, I believe that probation is doing good for Mr. Arrieta, and so he would benefit from remaining on probation. Thank you.
All right, and Mr. Arrieta, you have the burden of proof. I'll allow you, if you wish, to make a brief closing.
Sure. I don't think it's the probation that's keeping me on the right path. I think it's the rehabilitation and the AA meetings that are my sponsor, Todd, and working thoroughly in this program. That will not change no matter what your decision is here today. I do have a closing statement I did prepare, and I'd like to close my discussion with a quote from AA. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. I feel I followed the path of recovery well, and I would continue to do so when my probation comes to an end. I believe with continued hard work and recovery, I'm safe to practice physical therapy without being under probation any longer. My life is much better now compared to 2012, but that love for my wife and my infant son is not enough. Continue to work in this program, going to regular AA meetings, meeting with my sponsor, everything I've mentioned. Recognition of my triggers are vitally important to continued success in this program. I will continue to work in the recovery for the rest of my life because the fact that I recognize now I have a disease, one that is best mitigated by hard work and simply putting in the time necessary to stay sober. Thank you again for being here today to consider my termination from probation. I will accept the board's decision, no matter which decision is rendered, because I am very, very grateful to be here as a licensed physical therapist. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Arrieta. This matter is now submitted. The board will consider the matter in closed session. The record is closed. We're off the record.
I'd like to move into a brief recess for about 10 minutes, and we'll be back at 9:55.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, we are back from recess. It's 9:56 a.m., and I'm going to turn it back over to Administrative Law Judge Erlinda Schrager to continue with the hearings for early termination of probation.
All right, thank you. Oops. Thank you. Do we have Mr. James present? You can have a seat at the table here. Did you have any documents that you were going to present to the board during this proceeding?
I do.
Okay. Maybe we'll take those now
Okay.
before we go on the record. Why don't you just give the pile to Dr. Dominguez and we'll pass them down here. And then, court reporter, could you give one to Mr. Bill?
I have a copy.
Oh, you do? Okay. Oh, can you, Wesley, give it to Mr. Bill, we'll give it back to the judge.
Okay.
We are on the record in the matter of the petition for termination of probation filed by Daniel Leroy James. OAH case number 2016-100441. Today is November 16, 2016. My name is Erlinda Schranger. I am an administrative law judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings. I've been assigned to sit with the board, with the Physical Therapy Board, which is convened here today to consider this petition. May have the appearances of counsel and the parties for the record, starting with the Attorney General's office.
Good morning, Your Honor, board members. Deputy Attorney General Brian Bill on behalf of the people of the state of California.
And may I have the petitioner please state his name for the record?
Yes, my name is Daniel L. James. My middle name, L, is for Leroy.
All right, Mr. James, were you here during the previous hearing when I gave instructions as to the procedures here for today's hearing?
Yes, I was.
All right. I'm going to ask the court reporter if she could please incorporate by reference the instructions I gave to all the petitioners from the first hearing. Now we'll proceed as we did with the first hearing with the presentation by the Deputy Attorney General.
Your Honor, we're here today to decide the petition for early termination of probation for Mr. James. Mr. James was placed on probation in 2014 for numerous inadequate record-keeping issues. He is scheduled to remain on probation until October of 2017. Based on the evidence that we've presented today, I would ask that the board deny the petitioner's request. Thank you.
And Mr. Bill, did you have a stipulation with the petitioner?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe that the petitioner will stipulate that the documents in my trial binder will be introduced and accepted as evidence.
Is that correct, Mr. James?
It is.
For the record, then, let me just mark the documents in the exhibit book given to me by the Deputy Attorney General. Exhibit 1 will be the Certificate of Licensure. The document I'll mark for Exhibit 2 is the petition for reduction of penalty. Next, I'll mark as Exhibit 3 the petition for reduction of penalty report. Exhibit 4 is the notice of hearing. And Exhibit 5 will be the acknowledgement of receipt and agreement to appear. Those documents, per the stipulation of the parties, are admitted. All right, and Mr. James, do you wish to testify before the board?
I do.
Please raise your right hand so I can swear you in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
I first want to thank the board and Mr. Monty Martin for accepting my petition for early termination on August 29th and being on the docket for today's hearing. I want to express to the board that I acknowledge the mistakes I made in documentation, and I'm aware of the errors that I made. And I've done many things in the last 2 years to correct those mistakes. And I think I'm now in a position where I will continue documenting efficiently according to the standards put forth by the APTA and also by the rules and regulations set forth by the state of California. I want to acknowledge what the importance of documentation is in my case. I realized the mistake I made at this point, and at the beginning when Mr. Dutchauer came in my office and interviewed all my employees, and during the process of the audit that Sarah Polinsky did, I realized then that my documentation was in error at that point. I've now come to realize the importance of documentation, particularly the amount of time you need to spend, and that was my mistake prior to that. I want the board to know that I have a physical therapist that works with me and also a physical therapy assistant, and I allow them 2 hours of documentation time every day so that they won't make the same errors that I made. And that 2 hours is also I give to myself as well. Also, I believe that the documentation that we're doing now has increased my efficiency as a provider, and also the probation in general, along with the skills of documentation that I now have, has improved my ability as a physical therapist as well. So I've often say to myself and to my clients who question me about this probation, that there's always a silver lining under every cloud. And this particular silver lining has allowed me to become a better person and a better physical therapist. And I hope that it's also allowed my clinic to become a more efficient provider. Also, I want to explain to the board what has been taking place, what I've done in the last 2.5 years to correct my deficiencies. And my deficiencies were basically in the content and format of documentation. I've taken 7 courses, physical therapy courses, in the past 2 years, and 3 of them have been in documentation, which I found very beneficial. Also, immediately after Mr. Dutchauer and Sarah Polinsky were in my office, they came office a couple of days, but immediately after that, I realized the difficulty I was having with documenting. It wasn't that I couldn't document, it was just that I didn't give it the time. So I implemented immediately, even before the acquisition, I implemented immediately in January of 2014, an electronic medical records keeping system by RevFlow. And that particular record keeping system gives me the format and the content and gives me the ability to adhere to the so-called disablement framework of documenting, which the APTA has supported, as well as the state of California. My practice monitor, his name is Dr. Lewis Klein, has done 6 practice monitor reports. He's the gentleman who audits all my charts. And Dr. Lewis Klein views, in his opinion, that the introduction of the EMR system, and I quote on page 3 of the new report that you have there from September 12th, he reports that the EMR system that I implemented back in January of 2014 as a major improvement in the overall operations of the practice, end quote. I would also like to state that Dr. Klein was interviewed by Mr. Monty Martin in the so-called narrative, and in his final report, Mr. Martin or Dr. Klein reports that it is his opinion that early termination should be granted and that all the changes necessary to be in compliance with state rules and regulations governing the practice of physical therapy have been made. One more thing I would like to comment also is that the financial impact of this probation on my family and on my clinic has been devastating. And it's been a very big stress for me. And I think I've corrected my deficiencies, and I hope that they're to the point where the board will consider early termination in my case.
All right, thank you, Mr. James. Thank you, Mr. James. You did bring some documents with you, and you made reference to some of them during your presentation. Let's go ahead and mark and identify those documents for the record.
Yes.
First, and I understand that you pre-marked your documents using letters, but for the clarity of the record, we're going to mark your documents with letters. So let's look at the document, which on the cover page is marked as Exhibit 1. We're going to go ahead and mark that for the record as Exhibit A. Can you please tell the board what this document is?
Yes. The narrative statement that I submitted to the board on August 29th is very complete. But I have done some things since then that I think the board should be aware of. Exhibit A is a certificate of completion on a course of documentation I took. The course was called Physical Therapy Documentation from Examination to Outcome, and I obtained this certificate on October 14th, 2016. This was not referenced in my narrative report.
All right, next we'll go ahead and mark for identification as Exhibit B, the document that you identified, Mr. James, as Practice Monitor Report, Second Half Audit 2016. Please tell the board about this document.
This document, I have a practice monitor. His name is Dr. Louis Klein, and he has been coming into my clinic 4 times a year to review. He randomly posts charts and reviews anywhere from 9 to 12 charts at the time. Then he, following that, gives a report to Mr. Monty Martin. That 4 times a year process has now been reduced to 2 times a year by Mr. Martin, and I want to thank Mr. Martin for doing that, because that does a couple of things. One, it saves me a lot of time, and it saves me some money as well. And I appreciate that endeavor, and his gracious for doing that. I feel very thankful. Anyway, this is the last report for 2016. This is the second. And this report was not submitted. This report was submitted after my document was submitted on August 29th. So what this report is what Dr. Klein found in in his review of my charts. One thing I want to mention of this practice monitor report is that in this practice monitor report, Mr. Klein specifically says, and he makes a comment, I'd like to quote the comment. It's on page 2. It is apparent that Mr. James and his staff continue to employ the recommendations previously made. This is a greater consistency in the content of the subject matter in the medical records. I am pleased to see that Mr. James and his staff continue to use evidence-based medicine in justifying the interventions used in addressing impairments and functional outcomes of the patients. End quote. He also goes on to state on page 3, all requirements listed in the cause for discipline are being met. End quote.
All right. Thank you, Mr. James. And we'll go through, Mr. Bill, did you have any discussion with the petitioner regarding exhibits, what's been marked now as exhibits A, B, and C as to their admission?
Your Honor, I have no objection.
All right.
Your Honor, just one thing. I believe that Exhibit B has some attachments. So I don't know if the court wants to identify those specifically.
Well, I do see that Exhibit B, are you referring to looks like Exhibit A on page 29? Or what are you referring to?
Yes. There's 3 exhibits attached to this report.
Okay. Why don't I have the petitioner and the board, we're taking a look at pages 29 through 31 or 32. Mr. James, can you tell us tell the board what these documents are?
Yes. Exhibit A, all these documents were part of the report that Dr. Klein gave to Mr. Monty Martin. So Exhibit A is actually Exhibit number 3, which is a internal audit that my staff and I have started and we're going to audit charts in a similar manner that Dr. Klein is auditing my charts, so that we will ensure compliance with the APDA standards, and particularly California APDA standards and documentation. We'll talk about that next, because that's Exhibit 3. Also, the medical chart quality review, that's internal for our information to collect charts. These are the information that we collect on charts. The next one here, I don't know what it's called, exhibits, I don't know what page 31, I guess.
Well,
it
let me
says
just do
practice
one quick
monitor.
thing,
Yes.
just to clarify the record. So we're looking at Exhibit B, and starting from
Right.
page 29,
Right.
what you've just described for the board starts on page 29 is this implementation plan for quarterly medical chart quality review.
Yes.
And it looks like it's similar or the same as Exhibit C.
It's the same thing.
Okay.
And what Dr. Martin or Dr. Klein did is that he included that as part of the report. This is also something that was not part of my narrative as of August 29th. This is something new.
All right. Then continuing on in Exhibit B, the attachments, starting on page 30 and then going on to, I guess, what would be page 31. Okay. Tell us what this document is, Mr.
This
James.
medical chart quality review is our own internal document that we use to audit random
Oh.
charts. We've implemented a system in my clinic where we are going to audit random charts, not only mine, but my physical therapist and my physical therapy assistant.
Okay, that appears to be the document that comes before then page 30, where you have the cover page, it says Exhibit B, and then following that, there is looks like a one-page list of names.
Yes.
Okay, can you tell the board what this is?
This is my staff.
All right, and then continuing on in Exhibit B, there's now a cover page that says Exhibit C, and then a one-page document that follows that. It's handwritten. Please tell the board what this document is.
These are the notes. When Dr. Klein comes to my office manager, her name is Joe Maloroca, she takes notes during the process. Dr. Klein spends a whole day in my office reviewing charts. She assists him with that. And any notes or any information that Dr. Klein needs to give to me, she'll take notes. And then this is a copy of the notes she took for that particular meeting.
For the court reporter, could you spell the last name of your assistant?
Yes, I'll have to look on the list here.
Oh,
Yes. She has a hyphen name. Her full name is Jocelyn, Joseilyn, and we call her Joe, Jho, Mallorca, Mallorca hyphen Suarez, Suarez, and she is my office manager.
all right, thank you, Mr. James. And Mr. Bilzo, is there any objection to the admission of Exhibits A, B, and C?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibits A, B, and C are admitted. At this point, we'll now see if the board members have any questions for the petitioner.
Your Honor, may I cross-examine the petitioner?
Oh, okay. Yes, you may, Mr. Bill.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead. Who? Mr. James? Yes. Yes.
Good morning, Mr. James.
Good morning.
Mr. James, can you describe your note-taking process or procedure prior to being placed on probation?
Yes. It was the least of my priorities.
Was there any specific office policy with respect to note-taking?
Yes, there always an office policy, and the policy is that they need to be done. I'm in private practice, and to be very frank with you, it was not the most important thing on my list. After treating patients, at the end of the day, I kind of set it aside. Now I've implemented a system that I've learned from a business consultant. His name is Brian Murphy. It's called Eat the Frog. So every day, my office manager and my administrative staff have a things to do list. And on that things to do list is what I need to do for that particular day. And notes are the first one on the things to do list. I employ this concept by Brian Murphy called Eat the Frog. And what that is, if you do the hardest thing on your things to do list, everything else will fall in place. So that's the system I've implemented now since I've been on probation.
Prior to being placed on probation, when you described your note-taking procedure as the least of your concern, how long did you practice with that mindset with respect to note-taking?
I would have to say I started doing that probably around 1991. I would have to say after we had our daughter.
And so prior to 1991, did you take better notes? Did you chart better?
I think I chart better, certainly at the beginning when I first graduated from physical therapy school. I worked in hospitals, and so the requirement certainly was a little bit different at that time. I had supervision and things like that. But as I said, as I opened up my own private practice, I opened my own private practice in 1984, and I never thought of it as a problem taking notes. I always somehow managed to take notes. I always did the notes, but it was not my priority at the time. Now it's and as a result of that, I became very negligent in it. And I realize that now is my fault through going through this probation and the corrective measures I've taken. I now realize that at the time it was a detriment, possibly not only to my own professional career, but also it was not serving the public, because good notes are a defense to what you do as a clinic, and also it's also protecting the public legally and financially. And I realize now, particularly with insurance reimbursement, the power of a good note.
Okay, can you tell the board what the reason is that your note-taking devolved over time from 1991 to the date of being placed on probation?
If I understand your question, how I come to what I'm doing presently now?
No. You started off your career, you said, taking better notes. Is that correct?
I would say so, yes.
And then around 1991, your notes started to devolve, and
Yes.
it became less of a priority. Is that right?
I would say,
Is that
yes.
right?
I would say they became. I would say I became more negligent in taking my notes because of time.
What's the reason for that negligence? What
Well,
caused that?
in 1991, I moved my practice. Well, in 1991, we had a child, my wife and I, and I moved my practice in 1992, and a lot of it was having a large volume of patients to treat and not being able to take notes during that time that I'm in my office because of the need to go and take care of my wife and my child. I think that's when it really started. And also the need for me to increase the revenue of my business to support an extra family member. We had just bought a home as well. And so I think taking the notes became a less priority for me. And it just kind of started stacking up on me as I look back on it now. And now I realize the errors I made, and I take the corrective measures now so that will not happen again, nor will it happen with any of the staff members I have in my office.
Between 1991 and the date of being placed on probation, how many staff members did you have working for you, approximately?
I've always had between 6 and 8.
Okay. Does that include physical therapists or physical therapist aides?
Up until the time of my probation, I was the only physical therapist. I hired a part-time physical therapist that worked probably 10 to 20 hours, not even, maybe 10 hours a week at the most, and he also filled in during my vacation.
Okay. Between 1991 and the date of being placed on probation, did the standards of note-taking in the community, did that change at all, to your knowledge?
And as I look back now and during my studies, it has changed.
Okay. And between 1991 and being placed on probation, did you take any continuing education classes with respect to note-taking?
No.
Okay. Now, Dr. Klein is your practice monitor?
Yes.
And Dr. Klein has drafted 6 quarterly reports since you've been placed on probation?
Yes, he has.
Okay. And in those 6 quarterly reports, Dr. Klein has provided suggestions each time for you and your staff to improve your note-taking. Is that right?
He has.
Okay. And have you implemented those suggestions each time?
I have.
Okay. Now, with respect to your Exhibit B, specifically the attachment that follows page 31,
Could you show that?
the handwritten
Yes.
note. This is a handwritten note created by your office manager,
Yes, it is.
and the handwritten note details the suggestions that Dr. Klein made during this past quarterly
Yes.
report. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and have you and your staff implemented these suggestions?
We do, and we have a quarterly, after Dr. Klein comes in the office and does his audits of our records, we then have a meeting, a staff meeting, Joe and myself, and Kendra, who is my physical therapist that works with me, and as well as Roselle, who is my physical therapy assistant. We sit down, we go over the notes, and we go over the recommendations that Dr. Klein makes.
Okay. And this latest report by Dr. Klein is dated September 12th, 2016, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, with respect to your rationale for terminating probation, you stated that you are currently having financial hardship, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay. In your written narrative, you described the potential loss of physician endorsement and insurance. Do you remember drafting that?
Yes.
Okay. And to date, you have no specific information regarding loss of referrals, is that right?
There's nothing concrete, but the potential exists.
Okay, so you haven't lost any referrals up until this point?
Referrals in terms of physician referrals?
Correct.
I have not.
Okay. Now, with respect to the insurance, in your narrative, you indicate that you were temporarily dropped by one insurer. Do you remember writing that?
Yes, I remember when that happened.
Okay. Have you been re-credentialed by that insurance company?
Yes, I was re-credentialed, and the reason I was able to become a provider again was because of my physical therapist, Kendra Frank.
Okay.
And I've been re-credentialed with all the insurance companies since that point.
Okay. I have nothing further.
All right, now I'll have questions from the board members, and I'll start with the board president, Ms. Ellaby.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning.
Good morning.
You mentioned that you learned through the continuing education that better note-taking has improved your ability to create stronger notes for insurance purposes, legal and financial, but what I'm not hearing is the effect on patient care. Our charge is to protect the safety and well-being of the public, and so I'd like to hear you articulate how negligent note-keeping could affect the patient.
Well, it can affect the patient legally and financially. Financially, if the insurance company requires notes and you don't have the correct notes, it could certainly affect payment. That would affect the patient, particularly if I go back and tell them that, the insurance is not paying. There's nothing I can do to do that, of course. But it also legally defends their case if you have good notes. It provides a narrative of what is done in the clinic and a narrative of the problem they have and the outcomes that you want to achieve. Notes can dictate that. And when you're in a legal case, that would be a strong defense for a patient who is in a court system going through litigation for whatever reason. The other thing I think that's important is that taking good notes has allowed me to be a more efficient provider, and that is certainly a benefit to the consumer.
Thank you. Also in your narrative provided, you have a list of all of the continuing education courses that you've completed. I'm not seeing that in the record, the certificates, other than the one that you
I
provided
have the
today.
certificates with me if you care to see them.
We would, yeah. And then I have no further questions. You need to mark those into evidence. Okay.
I have 2 copies. I guess here's one. I don't have 12, but can I just give these to the...
Why don't you-
I have a copy for you, Farley. Here's one for you.
Why don't we go off the record a moment for the hearing? Why don't we just take a look at the documents first? Could you pass those around?
And there's another copy here if you wish.
Do you want both copies?
Sure. Take a look at these. See if you have any questions. Take a look at these.
I looked at it, it's fine.
I do have a question.
Okay. First, let me do.
Mark it into evidence? Yeah. Okay. That's the order it was in. Did you want to open the record back up? Okay.
Okay. All right, we're back on the record. Mr. James has provided us with a copy of a collection of certificates of attendance. I'm going to go ahead and collectively mark these documents for identification as Exhibit D. Ms. Ellaby has had a chance to take a look at the documents. She has another question for the witness. And to the extent the other board members, if you want to take a look at these documents before it's your turn to ask questions, we have another copy floating around up here. So go ahead, Ms. Ellaby.
Thank you, Mr. James, for providing the proof of certificates for attendance. I don't see the one for August 18, 2016, the physical therapy documentation from examination to outcome. It looks like
That was the last one I took. I think that's the one you're looking at now.
dated October 14th on the certificate, and in your statement, it has an August date,
August 10th?
August 18th.
It may have been just...
A typo?
A typo,
Okay,
yes.
thank you. No further questions.
All right. Did you have any objection, Mr. Bill, to Exhibit D being admitted?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit D is admitted. And so now we're going to start on to my left down the table here, and we'll hear from Ms. Rabina Amen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm sorry if I missed it in the materials. Do you have to disclose probation to referring physicians?
No.
You don't? Okay.
My disclosure is to the patients that I treat.
Right.
And it's a
Okay.
written disclosure that they signed prior to me treating them.
Okay. Yeah, I see in your narrative that you were concerned about physician referrals being affected by being on probation. Can you talk about that a little bit?
My concern is when a client or patient signs the condition of probation, that they go back to the doctor. That was a big concern in the beginning. It's not a concern now, but it's not as big of a concern now, but it's an ongoing concern. I have a good relationship with all my physicians. However, that ongoing concern is still a stress in my life, particularly because I want to sell my practice now and I want to retire in the next 2 to 3 years. I'm 64 years old. And I want that referral source to continue to be strong, which it is. but I want to try to eliminate all potential problems that could exist for the next buyer.
Okay. If for some reason a patient did mention that they had to sign that they received notification of your probation to one of their physicians, and the physician contacted you, how would you handle that?
I would handle it the same way when I talk with my patients who question me. I let them know that I was expanding my office. It's kind of a long story. I'll try to shorten it up. But basically, around 2012, 2013, I was in a construction and I was expanding my office. I was creating a wellness center. My office now is called West Portal Physical Therapy and Wellness Center. And I took out a small business loan for construction. I ran out of money during the construction process, and I had to let go of an employee. It was this employee who reported me. He was become very disgruntled. And he said a bunch of things about me that was just a lie. And that's what prompted the investigation. But basically what I tell my clients is that I was, during this audit, they found my records to be deficient, my medical records to be deficient, and that in the process of that, they're going to come in randomly every quarter to review records. And if they, by chance, pull your record, this gives them the opportunity to review it. That's the way I handle it. And that's the way I would handle it with the doctor if he were to call me.
Okay. How many audits have you had from Dr. Klein this year? 2. One in August and one in September?
I don't know if the one was in August. No, it was earlier than that. I'm not sure.
Okay.
He was doing 4 audits a year, and then that was reduced to 2 by Mr. Martin.
Okay.
But he's completed 2 for the year of 2015.
Okay.
And I think 2016 he's completed 2.
Okay. I see one dated August 5th, and then you just supplied us one September 12th. So could it be that they were a month apart?
No.
No?
They're not usually that. No,
Okay.
I'm not sure. I don't have the audits in front of me except for the last one.
Okay, maybe that's just the date that he signed it.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay.
I wanna
Yeah,
say-
this isn't an audit. This is just a letter. I'm sorry. This is just a letter on behalf of Dr. Klein for you.
They're usually 3 months apart.
Okay. And in that letter dated August 5th, one of my concerns was in his closing paragraph, he didn't come out and say that your documentation was adequate and no further monitor was needed. He said you'd made improvements and he expects continued growth. So I just want to say that I appreciate you giving us the September 12th version of his audit and pointing out the last few paragraphs with his statements of his confidence in you. Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Watkins.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
I have a few questions. My first question is, back in January 2014, that's when you implemented the new system,
Yes.
right? And what led to that is that you suddenly became very aware that this record keeping has the potential to impact your business. Is that correct?
Not only impact my business, but I became very aware that I was deficient in medical record keeping and that I needed to improve it.
So, your deficiency, from what I can deduce in the record, it was more profitable for you to be deficient by the looks of it. Because the first, this is a primary factor. Profitability was impacted when you were starting to become more deficient in these last 2 years.
If I understand your
reasonable?
question correctly, my profitability in the last 2 years has diminished. I'm not making the same profit as I was, not necessarily because of medical records, but primarily because of the mandate that I have to have a physical therapist supervise my assistants and my aide.
So you see no correlation between profitability and not keeping adequate medical records?
Not to the extent that I'm experiencing it at this point. my revenue has been consistent. What happened is that it disrupted my business model. As a result of that, my profitability has diminished because of the disruption of my business model, not so much necessarily because of note-taking. Note-taking was an error on my part. I don't think it affected my profitability. Although spending less time taking notes gave me more time to treat patients, I could see your argument there. But objectively speaking, the profitability is the loss of profit in my clinic was the direct result of my probation and having to have a physical therapist supervise my aide and my assistant.
And that whole process was set about by a previously disgruntled employee, as you pointed out.
Yes.
So-
Well, not the medical record keeping. That's my fault. The disgruntled employee made a complaint to the board, to the APTA, about me because he was upset with me for having to lay him off. And in that process, the board found, the investigation found that I was negligent in my record keeping.
You see, I'm seeing something here, that you knew what to do,
Yes.
and it was never important to do it.
I knew what to do. Are you talking about at the point of learning?
In January 2014,
Yes.
you implemented these
Yes.
record keeping like you knew what to do.
After,
And
yes.
also in the report, your employees, they also became very, they have some initiative. Dr. Klein pointed that out in bringing up new ideas about what needed to be done to better report
Yes.
and to better keep records to make your practice more efficient, as you pointed it out. But all of those things, as you set them up, they are time consuming, right?
Yes, they are.
And obviously, they do have a financial cost. That's where I make the correlation between the profitability. But what I'm pointing to is that there was a knowing that you had all along, since 1991, that said, I'm choosing to work more, profitability, expand my business, do all of these things, which becomes then profit driven. But it came at a cost, and the cost was the medical record keeping. Now, to be fair, when we go to any practice in the medical profession, there's that standard that, a requirement is placed upon physicians all through the medical physical therapy that, you have to keep records because of the legal and medical ramifications. And that was knowingly, from your point of view, that was, you pointed out that that's what it wasn't that important. And now it is very important because it is impacting that root, which is the profitability, whether you had to hire someone new to help you to remedy the situation. So my question is, what have you learned from this process? Being on probation, how it all came about, disgruntled employee, all of it.
The biggest thing I've learned, and like I've said earlier, is there's a silver line in every cloud. The biggest thing I've learned is that I've improved myself, and I've improved the ability to deliver care to my clients through better record keeping. I've become a better therapist because of it. And I'm also now implementing a system in my office where we're going to audit charts so that the therapist that works for me now and my assistant and whoever works for me in the future will not succumb to that same problem that existed in my provision of care. We've placed record keeping at a priority at this point. And the therapist that works for me and myself, as well as my physical therapy assistant, we have at least 2 hours of documentation time paid for now. And it's written in the schedule. And during that time, that's when we do our documents. For me, my documentation goes, first thing in the morning, that's when I'm the brightest, that's when I could get all my thoughts done. It's the first thing on my list, first thing in the morning, that my office manager puts on me. There's the charts that I need to complete. And I do it, I purposely do it for that reason. Because I don't want to ever have to go through this again, and I don't want to fail the public, nor myself, nor my employees. I employ 7 people, and it's very, very encouraging to me that my staff loves me as much as they do, because they are very helpful. But also, I have a responsibility to them. I put food on their table for them. That's a big responsibility. And I don't want ever to be put in a position where that responsibility may be subjected to a legal process where I may not be able to do that. I take my work very seriously. I take my work and the employment of individuals very seriously. And whatever I can do to improve that, I will. And I found that the possibility exists by taking bad notes, the possibility exists that I could lose my license. And if I lost my license, then I would have 7 people out of work. And that would not be a good thing for me. It's an intrinsic value that I have.
Thank you.
Ms. McMillan?
Hello.
Hi, Mrs. McMillan.
When you started your business in 1984, am I
Yes.
correct? 1984, I'm pretty sure you probably took great notes. I'm pretty sure record keeping was probably high on your priority list. Am I wrong in that assumption?
No, you're not wrong. I did take good notes, I think, at the beginning. I took the SOAP format of notes. I still do, but I now use the disablement framework of taking notes. But I wasn't as busy back in '84 as I was. Sorry, in 1981 I moved my office. After the earthquake in 1989 in San Francisco, I had to move my office because the office was not earthquake. It wasn't seismic approved. So I had to find a place to move my office. And I was fortunate to find a place near where I worked. And so my fear at the time was that the referrals wouldn't follow me. But they did, and I was fortunate. And so I became busy, and I was expanding my office, and I was making, my revenue was increasing on a yearly basis. Mm-hmm. Then we had our baby, and then domestic opportunities and responsibilities arose, and I just got into a pattern, I think.
Yes.
And that pattern was, and I see now, was neglecting the notes. It's not that I can't take a good note. It's the fact that I neglected them.
Thank you, because that's exactly what I wanted to hear you say, because I didn't want to assume things like that, but it did sound like you became overwhelmed, and a product of you being overwhelmed was you became negligent. But I do keep hearing you say good notes and bad notes. So do you think that your deficiency was more based on having bad notes or not doing notes?
I think both. I think my deficiency was not doing notes, not doing a complete initial evaluation, not doing a complete plan of care. So I think both. It was lack of notes and not a complete note.
Because I think that you clearly know how important record keeping
I
is
do.
and documentation is. How were you aware that there was a computerized system out in the world?
I was aware of the computer system, and I've often thought about doing that, even prior to this. In fact, I was researching computerized systems even before the audit, even before Mr. Dutchauer came to my office. I was researching it. My billing company, BMS Medical Management, was implementing a record-keeping system at the time, and I was considering theirs, along with some other ones as well, prior to this. It was this investigation at that point, I think it was in 2003, I can't remember the exact date, but after sitting down with the physical therapist who went through the notes with me, that's when I realized that something had to be done. So at that point, I honed my investigation, and at that point I decided to go with my billing company who developed their system called RevFlow.
what held you back when you were doing your investigation of different computerized systems? What was the one thing that stopped you from moving forward with it?
Primarily finances. They're not cheap. And one reason I decided to go with BMS is because they were doing my billing for me, and they allowed me to use their system as a I call it a thank you, if you wish, to continue with their billing. So it was less expensive for me, and as I look back now, it adheres to the so-called disablement framework that I'm employing. So it's a good system for me. It makes me document properly.
Even in your negligence of doing good documentation, you had mentioned earlier, though, that you still took notes. And
I always take notes. But
were they mental notes or were they written notes?
Yeah, I keep everything in my head. Up till 1991, I was the only therapist in my clinic. I had an aide and I had an assistant. And everything was in my head. I don't want to brag, but I'm a very good multitasker.
Mm-hmm.
And I know my patients very well, and I'm a good judge of character. And they were always in my head. I knew what I was going to do. My plan of care was in my head. The problems that they were facing was in my head. And I individualized everything, and I was able to do that. And that may be one of the things that caused me to be negligent in writing notes. It's not that he didn't write notes. There were just very few, and the content was very poor,
Mm-hmm.
and the format was incongruous.
The financial hit that
Yes.
you took, would you say that the biggest hit was, because you kind of said it earlier, but was it the fact that you did have to hire another physical therapist? And I saw
Yes.
that it cost you $268,000
Yes.
a year. That was the biggest.
Well, the biggest hit, these figures are based from the time I was put on probation, October 3rd, 2014, to the time I've done my audits for these figures, which was August 31st, 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And what has happened in that year, in that year and a half or close to 2 years there, I had to hire a therapist to supervise my aide
Right.
and my assistant. And the cost of doing that was $268,000. In addition, I had to take out a business loan for working capital. And I'm paying off the principal interest of that business loan now. In that time period there, 10/3/14 to 8/31/16, that's been $114,000. In addition to that, I had to take out all my cash and everything in my retirement fund to add cash to my business. They call it a cash contribution. It says $47,000 here, but in actuality, it's closer to $50,000. I'm completely broke.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Because I know at the end of the day, anything that happens in your business, you're the person who's going to take the hit
That's correct.
for it. And so when all this monitoring and everything is over, how are you going to make sure, and I'm not saying you, how are you going to make sure that your staff continues to do what they need to do so you won't find yourself ever in this position again? Because you can get every computerized system out there, but somebody still has to stay on top of that.
Yes.
So how do you plan on making sure that you don't find yourself sitting in that chair again, not because of you, but because of maybe your staff, another disgruntled staff?
Well, there's nothing I can do to control disgruntled staff, but I think by being on probation, it has improved the communications with my staff, my front office and myself, and with the therapist I work with. But the answer to the question is, I've given my staff, the clinical staff, my physical therapist, Kinder Frank, as well as Roselle, my physical therapy assistant, time to do documentation. And they know the EMR system by RefFlow just as well as I do. They've learned along with me. So they're working diligently at that. The third thing is that we've implemented an internal audit where my office manager, Joe, and her assistant, her name is Angie, We'll pull random charts quarterly.
So that's what that is.
Yes. Random charts from Roselle's, random charts from mine, and random charts from Kendra. And they will review them. That's my exhibit that you have in front of you.
Right.
They will review them in a similar manner that Dr. Klein is reviewing the charts. And they find deficiencies, they bring it up to the therapist, and then they will correct it. And we're going to do that on a quarterly basis. Dr. Klein's monitoring has been done on a quarterly basis and has been reduced by Mr. Martin to a biannual basis. Well, what this is going to do now, hopefully, if I'm off probation, is continue that process, but on a quarterly basis, not twice a year, but 4 times a year. That's going to ensure that my clinical staff will be compliant with proper note-taking, as well as myself. So we're doing it, we're internally monitoring it. And I hope that is going to help me not to ever fall back to where, or any of my clinicians,
Right.
to fall back to where I was prior to this.
Thank you so much for indulging me and helping me to connect the dots. I have one last question. Did you take any courses in 2015? Because I was looking at the
I
certificates.
think some of them were 2015, yeah, I'm not sure of the
Maybe I
dates.
just missed them. Okay. That's it. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Did you wish to see,
The 2015? Yeah.
oh, I don't know if the 2015, but those were the documents that Mr. James presented.
I looked, but I didn't see, I saw 2013, 2014, but I didn't see any in 2015.
If the certificates are not there in 2015, maybe I didn't take any.
Okay, well, I do have one more question. Yeah, none for 2015. And the way it appears is that after you got in trouble, you took courses, and then as it got closer to your ending time, then you took courses. What happened in 2015?
Well, 2015 was a big year for me. First and foremost, it takes a lot to learn an EMR system, and it takes a lot of time to implement it. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
But also number 2 is my wife got very sick. And it's just something I had to take care of. And she's doing better now, and I thank God for that. But it was very stressful. And it was that plus having to deal with the probation. I've talked with Mr. Martin about it. It's not the reason I'm here today. But it is certainly, it was so time consuming. And the expense of her medical care is so overwhelming. That it's just hard. And so I just didn't have time. I had to take care of my wife.
I understand.
And I had to call my daughter home from New York. She came back to live with us, and she was big, and she was very instrumental in helping my wife get better because, you know, my wife missed our daughter very much. And when my daughter came home, my wife took a turn for the better, and she's doing better now, and I thank God for that. But that stress during the time was so time consuming. I just running my practice and taking care of my wife was a burden that I had to do, and I just had to do it. And that could be the reason. I'm not offering it a reason, but nor is it a reason why I'm pleading my case today, because I really think I rehabilitated myself sufficiently to allow this board to look at what I've done, to give them an objective criteria to determine if I am really eligible to terminate my probation, because I really think I am.
It's understandable that gap then, that now makes sense.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. No more questions.
All right, thank you. Ms. Alviso?
So I wanted to find out if part of going to the EMR, a lot of those systems will walk you through.
Yes.
And pretty much you have to complete a section.
Yes.
Or the record's incomplete. Are there things like assessing function or outcome measures, measurements of pain that maybe have been added since you went to that?
Yes. with the disablement framework of documentation, that coordinates the patient's problem with a functional outcome, a deficiency in their function. In my practice, I use the numeric pain scale, and I also use 4 outcome measures. I use the LEFS, the lower extremity functional assessment. I use the quick dash for the shoulder and upper extremity. I use the back index, and I use the neck index as outcome measures. Every patient fills one out prior to being treated. And then at discharge, they fill it out again, and I measure the outcome.
Can you give me an example of how improved documentation has changed patient care?
Yes, I can give you. It allows me to set appropriate goals.
Okay. So a little more concrete instead of kind
Yes,
of those
short-term
soft
and
ones.
long-term, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then I noticed in one of your exhibits that has a chart audit and it has notes from that.
Yes.
Can you explain to me your practice model a little bit? Because it looks like treatment's assigned to
Yes.
the other PT.
Yes. Part of the mandate of being probation is that I have an assistant, and any time she sees a patient, that patient needs to be assigned to my physical therapist because I'm not allowed to supervise the physical therapy assistant. And so when a client of mine comes in, a patient of mine, they sign a form indicating that, well, I sign a form, and it goes in a chart indicating that their care is now under the supervision of Kinder Frank if my assistant takes care of that patient.
Okay.
So in other words, the assistant could treat one of my patients, but that supervision of that treatment is from Kinder Frank.
Got it.
So that's the form you see.
And did we have any patients in here? Do you follow any patients at this
I
point?
treat, yeah, I have a caseload of patients.
Okay.
Yes, I treat patients all
Okay.
along. I've been doing that all along.
Okay. And then you've mentioned that you have a couple of hours scheduled for documentation.
Yes.
Does any documentation happen at the time of patient care?
No, I find it very difficult. Here's what we do. I still take notes, and then I take those notes and put it in the document. It's very time consuming. I'm not good at taking a computer in and doing, documenting at the time I treat. So what I do, and what my staff does as well, is that they will take longhand notes, and then they transcribe it into the EMR system. And that's the 2 hours that we use. The charts on the previous day are on my desk the next day, and their desk. And then those 2 hours we have, that's when we go and we do it.
Okay. Have you found that sometimes when you're doing that there's something that you've missed from the day before?
I always think in retrospect, yes, there are some things I missed the day before that could maybe come up.
That while you're documenting?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then
Yes.
what happens with those?
The things I miss, I include them while I document. You mean the things that I don't put down in documentation?
Yeah, like if things that weren't done, maybe that's the way I want to say it, things that weren't done the day before in your evaluation, or that should have been.
I document it. If I read about my patient or the treatment I do in my patient, I document it in the chart. But there are occasions when I look at the notes, I say, well, I did this as well, then I will include that if that arises. But,
I'm thinking of
yeah.
going through the record, the electronic record, and realizing, I didn't even do that. I didn't manual muscle test, or I didn't do such and such. Then what? If you're documenting.
Well, if that's the case, and if I neglected to do it at the time, if I thought about it, then it would be done the next visit.
Okay.
And I'll put that in my plan of care.
Okay, so you would capture that and
Yes.
be able to get to it.
I understand your question.
So then when you're treating that, do you keep a hard copy chart?
We keep hard copy chart, and then once the patient is discharged, I think those notes are destroyed, and we just keep the record on the EMR system. We scan everything into the EMR system with the exception of the notes. And all the things that we scan after the patient has been discharged are not kept. They're kept inside the EMR system.
Okay. And so the next day when you're seeing, or the next visit, when you're seeing someone, are you using the electronic records as reference for that visit?
I use electronic records if I'm at my desk. If not, then I use the record that I used prior to that treatment. But usually the electronic records are in the chart. See, we make a hard copy of them.
You print them out?
Yeah, and they're in the chart.
Okay, so you're still working off of paper for
We're still working off
during
of paper,
treatment?
but it's not a complete transition. We're still working off paper, simply because it's difficult for me and for my therapist and assistant to implement them at the same time treating. It's a little bit different. You're a physical therapist. It's a little bit different. You know, we're hands-on people. You go to a primary care physician, they can talk to you and they can implement very easily. But it's more difficult when you're hands-on. And so what I do often, if I'm with my assistant, she will document things and for me and put down if I'm examining. What I do is that I have what they call exam ET, which is exam together. And if my assistant is going to treat a patient of mine, I will go and examine that patient. She will write in the chart what I did, and she will document as a scribe, so to speak. And then we'll follow the plan of care. Her supervision, though, is with Kinder Frank. They go over that plan of care, okay, as well. But it's a hard way to do things, but I just cannot integrate the implementation of the electronic medical record as I'm treating a patient. I'm having a hard time with it.
Okay. So that thing when I was mentioning, if you'd forgotten something and you're going to put it in your plan of care for the next time,
Yes.
is that something you're able to print and that's what you're working off of next time, or are you working off your written notes?
The written notes will be in there, as well as that note that I put in the chart that are in the plan or in the EMR system. That note will be typed out, will be printed.
Printed.
And will be in that chart at the time on the next visit.
Okay. So you're kind of living in the limbo world, huh?
It's kind of limbo world,
Yeah.
I think.
It is, it's awkward.
It's awkward, but it's just a hard thing to do. And it's time consuming. But that's what reality is.
Okay. Well, you've helped me understand how that's working for you. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Drummer?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to make sure. I have a question to start with the handwritten note that you put into that's in with the exhibit. If you could look at that and help me go through that, because I'm trying to follow it and understand.
Is that what the practice monitor note?
It's the handwritten, I believe you said that it was Joe's handwriting?
Yeah, yes.
For the record, I think you're referring to Exhibit B, and it's probably the last page of that exhibit.
It's close to the last page.
Okay.
Of that particular exhibit, yes. Yeah. So this is Joe's handwriting.
Yes,
and
Joe is my office manager. She's
right.
the lady who sits with Dr. Klein during his audits.
Okay, so, and this is with Dr. Klein, with a Dr. Klein audit of a chart. So she's taking notes of what,
yes.
Dr. Klein is reviewing a medical record.
Yes.
And Joe is taking notes about what Dr. Klein's comments are.
Yeah, it's a process. They sit together while Dr. Klein, it's an all-day process. He's in there reviewing records. And if he has a question for Joe, or if he wants Joe to address something, this is what she writes.
Okay.
These are notes from his comments.
Okay.
Not particularly about a medical record, but maybe comments in general as well.
Okay, and this is from the September 12th visit of Dr. Klein to your clinic?
Yes.
Okay, and so at the very top, I guess that's Dr. Klein? It's written? It kind of looks...
Dr. Klein is that, you're right.
Okay.
Dr. Klein, yes.
Okay, and then if we can, just going down the list, because I'm handwriting,
Yes,
I'm
I
usually
can't
pretty
read
good
it.
at it because I
Yeah,
work at a
I can help you,
hospital.
I think.
But so prescription is legally required
After 30 days.
after 30 days,
All insurance/cash patients.
and then an arrow indicating that assigned plan of care, POC, is another form of prescription.
Yes.
Okay. And a prescription is really not what's required. It's a diagnosis is what's required by regulation, by the law.
Yeah, I think that's what they mean here.
Right. Okay.
Um,
So just to clarify
Yes.
that. Okay. And then PMH review, past medical history review, the next
Where's
line?
that one now?
The next line? Is that
Pain-
right?
I think that's pain review,
Pain review?
flow sheet suggestion.
Flow sheet suggestion,
Yeah.
okay. And then the next one,
Patient's
patients,
own personal goals, initial evaluation suggestion. Patient's own personal goals, implement them in the initial evaluation, patient's own personal goals.
okay. And so these suggestions are things that are not currently in your EMR, that
No,
you
they're
would
not-
have to,
They're not. no.
okay. Okay.
And we've tried to implement them with the EMR system,
Mhm.
but they can't put them in there for whatever reason.
It's not editable or modifiable.
That's
The
correct.
EMR program is not, okay. And then next, patient history.
Yes.
And then if you could help me include,
Include aside from the prescription. What they mean by that, and what Dr. Klein means by that, following our meeting after his monitor review, is that he wants us to get patient history from the physician. So we try the best we can to call the physician at that point, and they sometimes, most of the time they do not, will send their medical history on that particular patient. So that's what he means by that.
okay,
It happens a lot with orthopedic doctors. We get them from orthopedic doctors. Most of my practice is orthopedic rehab. And the orthopods who referring patients will send them because of, we have a good rapport with them. But in terms of primary care physicians and physicians at UC, UCSF, it's very difficult to get information from them. So it doesn't happen all the time.
okay. And then the next item, notes/instructions need to be,
Here to be indicated, written authorization by MD physicians as proof. I'm not sure what that means. I'll have to talk with Joe about that.
okay. And then the last,
Any contraindications for prescription, any contraindications in terms of treatment on prescriptions. He feels we should list it, and we do list it. It's in the body of the EMR system, contraindications. I think that's what he's mentioning. I don't know exactly what the last thing there is, but I do recall talking with Dr. Klein about contraindications in terms of treatment.
Okay.
Such things as weight-bearing status,
Right.
things like that.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what he means by this, but in the EMR system, there is a contraindications area which we implement.
okay. And then, so this is Dr. Klein and Joe going through a record.
This is Joe and Dr. Klein. This is Joe's comments from sitting with Dr. Klein during the process of him reviewing our records, which takes about 8 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
And so were you present
I
were you
wasn't
at this?
I'm in the clinic treating patients as this occurs.
Okay,
And occasionally, I'll go into, they do it in my office. Occasionally, I go into my office, when I go in my office, they continue on, and I'm present at that point. But I'm not there present to listen to what they're doing.
okay.
I'm there present taking care of my patients.
And did you have or have you had direct meetings with Dr. Klein then
Yes.
to discuss these items as well?
Yes, normally we go out for lunch,
Okay,
and then we discuss it then. And we discuss it even before he starts the audit, we discuss things. And then right before he leaves, we have a 5 or 10 minute discussion. But most of it's during lunch break.
okay. And so,
I take him to lunch.
these notes that you're not sure of what some of the meaning is, this is raising a concern for me because you're not sure of what some of the meaning is behind these notes. And if you've had the discussion with him about things that need to be worked on, if you're not sure of what these notes mean, then how do I know that you had a meeting, that you had a discussion?
With Dr. Klein? Yeah, I don't take notes on the discussion I have with Dr. Klein,
Right,
so there's no way of knowing that.
okay,
These notes, though, are discussed in the meeting with my staff
right,
following his audit.
okay,
And the only one I don't really realize here is the contraindications. I'm not sure why he listed that. I haven't talked with Dr. Klein about it. But according, with the meeting we had, it was concerning contraindications with weight-bearing status on certain conditions. And that is addressed in the EMR system. That's the only answer I can give. I have not talked with Dr. Klein about that specifically.
okay. And then lastly, have you had a discussion with Dr. Klein about that you were planning to seek termination of probation?
Yes.
And what was his response to that?
When I first decided to, when I first wanted to try to apply for early termination, one of the requirements was to get someone to write a reference letter.
Mhm.
And I had two people write. One was Kinder Frank, the therapist that works with me, and the other one would be Dr. Lewis Klein, Dr. Klein. At that point, I spoke with him about my desire for early termination, and he was compatible with it, and he supported it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And finally, Mr. Dominguez.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr.
Good
James.
morning.
I have a short question, I think. So just to sort of summarize, if I understood you correctly, your mornings are first off 2 hours of documentation, is that right?
Yeah, I start treating patients around 9:30.
Okay,
I'm in my office at 6,
okay,
and I go through all the notes. I go through all the charts, even my therapist charts, even Kinder's charts and Roselle's charts. And I go through all the notes, and particularly all mine, and I do all my documentation, and it's actually 3 hours. But I do other things too, but that's when I do all my administrative work.
so documentation is completed prior to any patient receiving services in your office?
Yes.
Okay, so that the possibility would not exist that you may be documenting on patients that you saw the previous day, and Ms. Frank may be seeing that same patient during the time that you're documenting?
I don't document Miss. Well, the only patient that Miss Frank would be responsible for would be one that my assistant would be treating.
Okay.
And I go over that note prior to that. That's one of my process. I do two things in the morning. One, I do my notes, and two, I go over I go over what's going to happen to that patient prior to being treated. I go over it mentally, so that I can then go to, if it's assigned to Roselle, my therapy assistant, I make sure that the notes are correct, and I go over it mentally, because I'm going to meet with her prior to her treating that client. So that's what I do in the morning, so that everything is ready to go the moment I step in that room with Roselle. I have it in my mind what needs to be done.
So then what I think you're telling me is that the possibility would not exist that you may be documenting on someone that simultaneously is being treated by another, either your PT assistant or your...
It doesn't exist.
PT, right.
I'm not responsible for Kinder's notes, but I do review them. And I don't see that existing with her, but it does not exist with me.
And are you confident that, and again, does she take the same 2 hours in the morning?
No,
Or is it a different...
no. She has a different schedule than I do.
Okay.
She gets an hour and a half in her morning, and then she gets another hour. She actually gets 2.5 hours at the end of the day, and she normally spends actually more than that.
So then a patient that Roselle, your PT assistant, may be seeing, you're confident that Ms. Frank has completed her documentation prior to Roselle perhaps seeing that patient?
I am, and I see them in the office, and I see them confer with each other.
Okay. And so I guess my last question is more of a, and I apologize if you've mentioned it, I didn't catch it if you did, but I've heard you tell the board that you understand the gravity of why we hold documentation to be very dear and, why it needs to be exacting. I think you mentioned it's made you a better therapist, it's improved patient care. There was some, obviously you have a defensibility in case of audits, those kinds of things. But I wonder if you could tell me what kind of risk a patient might be placed under with inefficient or erroneous or documentation that has omissions.
Well, the biggest risk would be the delivery of care, maybe something not done quite right. So it's documented, you can follow that documentation. And if there's nothing there, you don't know what to do. If you're not treating the patient, if you're having somebody else treat the patient, that's the risk. And I think that's something that is being addressed now. That wasn't addressed prior to my probation.
Do you think there, again, this speculation, but do you think there may have been instances where adverse responses to therapy may have occurred and not documented in a timely manner, so that the next time?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
You have to remember, I was the only therapist in there, and it would have been brought to my attention.
Right, because you hired Ms. Frank after your
Yes.
probation.
I had a therapist that worked part-time for me and would cover during vacations. And I also might add that during that time, I would always make sure the charts were complete, so that therapist, could continue treating that patient. But also, I would make sure that the plan of care with Roselle, my assistant, was clearly documented, and I had written description of what needed to be done and a synopsis of that particular client. I would do that particularly before going on vacation, because I take a week or two sometimes for vacation. And so, in that respect, I did that even before this probation. So I do know the need for continuation of care, and that's what you're talking about.
Right.
Is that continuity of care is not disrupted. And so, and as far as I know, that has never occurred up to the point of my probation, because I was the one that only treating that patient. And if Roselle was doing it, I'd made sure that that plan of care was in place.
Okay, thank you.
All right, do we have any questions from any other board members? All right, Ms. Alviso?
Thank you. I'm still trying to understand the interplay between the paper chart and the EMR. So in the morning when you come in from the day before, give me a rough idea. How many charts?
Well, I have, in the morning is when I do my documentation.
How many charts?
Oh, I probably treat 15 patients a day.
Okay. And so then you put that in, you get it into the record.
Yeah, I do yes, that's correct.
And then I think you said then it all gets printed?
No, then what I do is that I don't print it, but what I do is I take the physical charts, I put them on Angie's desk, and then they file them, and they print the notes that I take, okay? And then you put them in the chart, and then it's filed.
So they go into each of the electronic records and print that note?
They can do that, yes.
Is that what they do?
Yes.
Every day?
Every day they're printing notes and putting in data.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
we also do inputs, patient information, things like that.
Okay.
In the medical record.
So when Dr. Klein has been there to do the audits, what is he looking at?
He's looking at the medical record, EMR record, and he also has most of my patients that he looks at, some are discharged, some are not. The patients who are discharged are in the EMR record, and we print a hard copy of that out, and that's in the record as well. So he's looking at the hard copy plus the EMR system.
Okay. Okay, so if it's somebody in current treatment, it would be in your hard copy?
Yes, and in the EMR system. And I also might add, when I'm doing my initial evaluation, I print that out immediately and send it to the doctor via email. When I'm doing a reassessment or reevaluation, the same process. I print that out immediately and send it to him, but that's when I do my printouts.
Okay.
Doing the initial assessment, the reassessment and reevaluations, and progress notes. I will do that.
And then just so I understand, you also said anything that you have that might be some kind of document that you've received eventually gets scanned into the record.
Yes, all patient information gets scanned into the EMR system.
And so it's the EMR system that becomes your legal record
Yes,
to be maintained.
yes.
The paper goes away.
The paper goes away only after they're discharged. Then they print the paper, then they print a hard copy of that record,
Okay.
and they store it in a chart. So we keep two systems, basically. One's electronic, and the other one is hard copy.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right, to the board members to my left, any questions? Okay, everyone's nodding no. Did you have any further questions, Mr. Bill?
Just a couple of follow-up questions. You described the difficulty of simultaneous note-taking when you're treating a patient, right?
Yes.
Do you know, does your physical therapist, is it Ms. Frank?
Yes, Ms. Frank is the physical therapist, Kinder Frank.
Does she take simultaneous notes when she
No.
treats a patient? Okay. And then you described your procedure for ensuring continuity of care when you would go on vacation. Do you remember
Yes.
testifying about that? And during those periods of time prior to going on vacation, before leaving your patients in care of your part-time therapist, you would make sure that those charts were complete, right?
Yes. And I would write a synopsis on the particular patient as well.
Okay. And during those periods of time when you go on vacation, was your charting better than usual, would you say?
I would say the charting was better than usual on the particular client patients that they were going to see during my vacation. I didn't look at the other charts, only the charts that were going to be, only the patients that were going to be treated during my absence.
And so you would spend more time on charting during that period of time prior to going on vacation?
I would make sure the charts were complete.
Okay. And then one last question. Prior to having Dr. Klein as your practice monitor, did you have any prior relationship with him?
I did.
Okay. Can you describe that?
Back in 1987, I want to say, the healthcare industry was going through, or insurance industry was going through a big change from PPO to HMO. And Dr. Klein approached my office. I didn't know who he was at the time, but he approached my office. I don't think he was a doctor at the time. He approached my office and was interested if I would be interested in seeing HMO patients and organizing an organization or a business that would contract with insurance companies that were trying to manage their physical therapy through an HMO system. So I said I would. And so from that point, Dr. Klein and I and 4 or 5 other therapists made a business called the California Physical Therapy Coalition, and we contracted with Brown and Tolan, which is a large medical group in San Francisco. And he was part of that organization that started that. And that's how I met Dr. Klein.
Okay, so it sounds like you had a business relationship with Dr. Klein initially in 1987?
In 87 I did,
Okay.
yeah.
And did that business relationship develop into a friendship?
No.
Okay, do you see Dr. Klein socially?
No.
Okay. Nothing further.
All right, then at this point, we'll hear closing statements if the parties wish to give one.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Bill.
Just very briefly. I think, once again, we are impressed with the progress that has been made with this petitioner, Mr. Daniels. However, given the length of time that his notes were deficient from 1991 to 2014, I don't believe that 2 years of probation is sufficient to correct those issues, particularly given the fact that each quarterly report conducted by Dr. Klein yielded suggestions and ways to improve his notes. This last quarterly report provided by Mr. Daniels today includes about 5 suggestions to improve his notes. So given that, it shows that while Mr. Daniels has made progress, he still has a way to go. And I think in order to ensure public protection, the probation should be continued. But I will ask the board to note that in the stipulation, page 3 and 4 of the stipulation, page 3 of the stipulation, and that's in the trial binder, Bates stamp page AGO 23. The stipulation contemplated a modification after 2 years. The board can choose to modify it. It's not mandatory. And I think given that this modification is already built into the stipulation, I would submit to the board that it would make more sense to implement this rather than terminating probation completely. And I think that that would solve some of the issues with respect to financial concerns that Mr. Daniels would have, as well as ensuring
Mr.
public
Bill,
protection.
I think the petitioner's last name is James. I think you were saying Mr. Daniels.
Yeah, James.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's okay.
Mr. I apologize. As I was saying, the granting the modification or employing the modification of probation that's already built into the stipulation would ensure public protection, as well as addressing Mr. James's issues with respect to his financial difficulties submitted.
All right, and finally, a closing from you, Mr. James?
Yes, I have a closing statement I'd like to read. I understand that the focus of my probation was improving the format and content of the data that I record, and it's my opinion, and importantly, the opinion of my practice monitor, that this has been greatly improved over the past 2 years. I am particularly thankful to the board and its consideration of my terminating this probation, because I am the owner and proprietor of my clinic. And as detailed in the narrative statement that I submitted, the probation has been devastating for the profitability of my business. Over the past 2 years, specifically, as a condition of my probation, I was no longer able to supervise my assistants and aid. Therefore, in order to continue to operate my clinic, I had to hire a full-time physical therapist to supervise. The patient volume of my clinic did not support this full-time hire. Specifically, from the dates 10/3/14 to 8/31/16, and I've talked about this before, the therapist cost me $268,000. My business loan, principal interest, $114,000. And personal cash contributions from myself is $47,000. It really was $50,000. I'm extremely thankful that on October 10th, 2016, Mr. Martin restored my ability to supervise my aides. This has given me a better opportunity now to return my practice to profitability. However, moving forward, the probation continues to impact revenue because of the ongoing cost of my business loans, costs of practice monitoring reviews, and because of potential loss of physician endorsement, loss of insurance credentialing, and patient concerns. For better or worse, I am personally the business. As the owner-operator of the clinic, I'm also responsible for 7 lives in my clinic and 7 employees. I would also like to supplement my income by seeing patients in their home. I was able to do that prior to this probation, and there's a stipulation in my probation that I can't do that at this point. I'd also like to finally mention that being 64 years of age, I'm in a point of now been retiring. I've been a private practitioner for many years, and I like to loosen up the reins a little bit. And I've just consulted with many business consultants, and they all tell me that it would not be a good idea to start that process until I'm off probation. And last but not least is my family issues. We've discussed it already. I don't need to dwell on it again, but I'm happy to say my wife is doing better, and I want to sit here and thank each and every one of you for listening to my petition, and I hope you carefully consider it.
Thank you, Mr. James.
You're welcome.
The record is now closed. The matter is submitted and will be decided by the board in closed session. We're off the record. Oh. Wait. I think that's what she's asking for. Okay. Oh, no, I need you to go back on the record on this one. Okay, we're back on the record. At the request of the board's legal counsel, for this case, all right. I just wanted to state for the record on this case, and then we're going to go ahead and reopen the record from the first hearing because I see the petitioner for that case is here. But I just wanted to state for the record the board members who are present for this case. And why don't I just have each of them state their names for the record, so that way we'll have it'll be clear on the record who's here, and then we're going to repeat the process for the first hearing because there's a board member who is present for this hearing who was not here for the first hearing. So can I have just each board member state their name for the record?
Jesus Dominguez.
Daniel Drummer.
Deborah Alviso.
Katerina Ellaby.
Alicia Rabina Amen.
TJ Watkins.
Tanya McMillan.
All right, and thank you for that. Let's go off the record for the court reporter for a moment. And for the case that was heard earlier this morning for Mr. Arrieta, I see Mr. Arrieta is seated here and our Deputy Attorney General is still here. What I'm going to do is request that the court reporter please reopen the record from the first hearing, and I'm going to have the board members, and I'm going to ask the court reporter if she could please incorporate by reference the roll call of the board members that was just completed here into the record, the transcript to the first hearing.
But Tanya wasn't here.
Oh, that's right.
That's right.
Okay. Another correction. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. Let's go. I'll have each board member who was present at the first hearing, please state your name for the record. If a board member was not present, please do not state your name. Go ahead.
Jesus Dominguez.
Daniel Drummer.
Deborah Alviso.
Katerina Ellaby.
Alicia Rabina Amen.
TJ Watkins.
All right, and just for hopefully for clarity of the record, we have board member Tanya McMillan who is present for this case, but she was not present for the first hearing, and she will not be voting on the first petition. Okay. All right. Then with that, we will close the record on the first case and close the record on this case. We're off the record.
We're going to break for recess for about 10 minutes and come back and do our third case for PT petitioner Courtney Jump. Thank you.
Thank you.
The time is 11:48 a.m. And I'm going to turn it back over to our administrative law judge.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ellaby. All right. We have the parties present for the third petition hearing today, so I'll go ahead and open the record for that. We are on the record in the matter of the petition for termination of probation filed by Courtney Jump, OAH case number 2016-100657. Today is November 16, 2016. My name is Erlinda Schrenger. I am an administrative law judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings. I have been assigned to sit with the Physical Therapy Board, which is convened here today to consider this petition. May I have the appearances of counsel on the parties for the record, starting with the Attorney General's office.
Deputy Attorney General Brian Bill on behalf of the people of the state of California.
Courtney Jump.
All right. And Ms. Jump, were you present during the first hearing today where I gave general instructions as to what was going to happen during the course of this hearing?
Yes, I was, Your Honor.
And did you understand those?
Yes.
Okay. And I will instruct the court reporter if she could please incorporate those instructions into the transcript of this hearing by this reference. All right. We'll start with opening statements. Mr. Bill, do you wish to give an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. We're here today to decide whether or not to terminate Ms. Jump's probation early. Ms. Jump was placed on probation in 2014 as a result of her sustaining 2 alcohol-related driving convictions. The first was a driving under the influence charge in 2003. And the second was a reckless driving with involving alcohol and/or drugs. And Ms. Jump has been on probation for approximately 2 years. At the end of this hearing, I will ask you to respectfully deny her request. Thank you.
All right, and I think what we'll do, Ms. Jump, as I did in the first 2 hearings, we'll hear from you after I place you under oath and you testify, okay? And Mr. Bill, you had documents to present?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe that Ms. Jump and I have a stipulation with respect to the documents contained in my trial binder. However, with respect to Exhibit 1, it was brought to my attention that this copy of the certificate of licensure is it doesn't reflect that it's a current copy. Apparently the certificate of licensure expires on February 28th, 2018. So I don't know if the court wants to accept this with that note or just disregard the exhibit altogether.
Well, just so I understand, so is the correction on from this Exhibit 1 document, license expiration date, it says February 28, 2016. That should actually say for 2018?
Yes, I've renewed it since then.
That's my understanding.
Okay. What I'll go ahead and do is, by interlineation, on the record copy I have here, is on Exhibit 1, I will strike out 2016 and write in 2018. Okay, and I'll put my initials next to it, so that on Exhibit 1, for the license expiration date, it now reads February 28, 2018. And that's the correct date, Ms. Jump?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, and go ahead, Mr. Bill.
And with that correction, I would ask that the court move into evidence the documents in my trial binder.
And I can't remember, did you have a similar stipulation with Ms. Jump as you did with the other petitioners?
Yes.
And stipulate to the admission of the documents? Is that correct, Ms. Jump?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Then just for the record, I'll mark for identification as Exhibit 1 the certification of licensure amended as I've just done here on the record. Exhibit 2 will be marked, and that is the petition for reduction of penalty with the attachments. Exhibit 3 is the petition for reduction of penalty report, and I'll mark as Exhibit 4 a notice of hearing. And those documents, by the stipulation of the parties, are admitted. Okay. All right, so we will,
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
okay. And Ms. Jump, you may proceed with your presentation.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you for your time and for the opportunity to come here today and request my early termination and probation. I want to start by apologizing to you for my actions. There's no excuse for drinking and driving, and I deeply regret those choices that I made. I put my life in danger, I put the lives of others in danger, and I was a poor representative of the physical therapy profession. So I understand now that as a healthcare provider, I'm an authority figure and I'm a role model to many patients. And I understand that my professionalism extends beyond my workplace. And, you know, as I treat my patients, I teach them health and fitness, wellness, and I need to be an example of that as well. I want to instill in them confidence in my care, and I can do that by demonstrating morality and good decision-making, good judgment, and a healthy lifestyle. So I believe that I've made changes in my life over the last 5 years, and that now I can be that. Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right, we do have a court reporter who's taking down everything that's
I
going
talk
to
fast when I'm
speak.
nervous, sorry.
That's okay. All right. Can the court reporter read back the last part of what the witness or petitioner was saying?
I believe that I have made changes, I think.
Oh, okay, so slow down and take a deep breath. Go ahead.
So I believe that I've made changes in my life over the last 5 years that enable me to be that good example that I want to be to my patients. So I hope that through my petition and through my testimony today, you believe that I am also a changed person and that I am now able to be a good representative of the physical therapy profession.
Okay, and actually, one thing I forgot to do was
Oh.
swear in the witness. All right,
Forgot to.
so may I have the petitioner please raise her right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And is that oath the same for the statement that you just gave to the board?
Yes.
All right.
Would you like me to proceed?
Yes. Did you have anything else to
Well,
tell
I
the
understand
board?
that I'm supposed to talk to my rehabilitative efforts and why I believe that I'm
Yes, this would be
capable.
the time
Okay,
for that.
So I would like to proceed. I prepared some notes. I hope that that's okay. I want to make sure that I say the things that are on my mind. First of all, I've complied with all the probationary terms, mainly stopped drinking. And I think that's the most important aspect to me, ensuring that this will never happen again. In line with that, I've submitted to random biological fluid testing. It started about an average of once a week. And in about a year and a half after it began, reduced to about 3 times per month. So I've been doing that consistently with negative results. I enrolled in Maximus, drug and alcohol rehab program, and although I was not admitted into the program, I did a 30-day evaluative period where I went to AA meetings daily. And I have found that AA was very valuable for me. I think at the beginning of the program, it was a good time for me to have to go to AA because I was having a difficult time accepting my circumstances and really taking responsibility for being in this position where I was. And so going to AA really made me take responsibility for my actions, that I was here and that I'm in this position with the board because of choices that I made. And I'm able to accept that now. And I was able to find acceptance to my circumstances as a whole, that there's nothing I can do. I love that AA mantra, the Serenity Prayer. Change the things you can, accept the things you can't. And that's really great for me because I'm one of those people that tend to want to control everything. And I need to be able to learn how to relinquish my control and just accept people and situations. And I think that I've done a really good job of changing that in my life. I think it's gone into more circumstances than just this probation, but in all circumstances, I find I'm better at accepting what I can't control. another thing, if I can mention, another thing that really stood out to me in AA was that somebody said in AA once that, it's like standing up against a big picture or like a big mural. Sometimes it's like you're standing right here. Sometimes you just need a little distance to see. Sometimes you may just see some lines and some splotches, but then you back away from it and you can see the big picture. And I think that really affected me because I realized I needed to understand that there was going to be purpose and that there is purpose to this, and that if I just, accept my circumstance and try to make the most of everything that I'm undertaking, then I will see the purpose in the end, and I have. So I tried to make the most of that time and try to, AA focuses a lot on, self-improvement and being a better person in all standpoints. And I've tried to incorporate those concepts into my life in other ways. I do a daily devotional with my fiance. We read together every night. We also read other books like anger management books and books on how to, act with love and patience, and spiritual books as well. I read those daily inspirational quotes, and I also listen to educational and motivational podcasts to and from work every day. And I really love that too because it helps me focus on really who I want to be and how I want people to see me and how I want to live my life. And it kind of just refocuses me and kind of reminds me what I want to be like. So I love that. I've also been consistent with my continuing education. I've always respected the field of physical therapy, and I've always wanted to be the best PT that I can be. And I believe that the more educated I am, the more tools I have and the more equipped I am to be able to help my patients to the best of my ability. So I've continued with that, of course, through this probationary terms. Also, having recognized that I could lose my license to practice as a whole, not just my job, but the ability to practice physical therapy was terrifying. This is something I'm so passionate about, and to not be able to be a physical therapist anymore was really terrible. It was really terrifying. So through this process, I've really rededicated myself to my profession, I believe. I think I've realized that as a privilege, it's a privilege to be able to do what I do, and I want to be, I want to contribute to my profession the best way I can. I have really recognized my love for my job and respect for the profession. So I have an increased sense of duty. I've rejoined the APTA. I want to be more involved in my professional community, and I've also wanted to be more involved in volunteer work. The last ethics course I took really emphasized our professional responsibility to the community, to educate and help serve in doing pro bono work and such. And I've tried to look for opportunities to include that as well. So I've learned a lot of things through this experience. I've learned the changes I need to make, that I need to stop drinking, that I need to put more focus into my work and my relationships and less on my social life. I need to be constantly striving for self-betterment. And then once I've made the changes, and I know that's a continual process, but continuing to make yourself a better and better person, then I need to focus that energy outward and give as much as I can and focus on other people. And that's really rewarding when you do that. I've realized the possibility of losing my ability to practice physical therapy and my privilege and my love of my job. Also my professional responsibility, that it's not just about going to work and coming home, that it's about promoting the field of physical therapy. It's about promoting our profession as a whole. It's about every patient that comes into my office, I want to have them leave with this, with their loving physical therapy. I want them to go, wow, physical therapy is amazing. Physical therapy works wonders. I want them to, I want to promote the whole field. I want to be in the profession. I want to be in the, public. That means reading articles and research and, doing community service. That means being an example to my patients. And I've noticed too that with less chaos in my own personal life and with more stability, I'm able to be more present for my patients. I think I'm able to focus more on the care that they need and also other problems that they come to me with. I'm just able to have more perspective and have more understanding for the things that they come to me with in my daily work. The main reason I'm bringing the petition today is because my job is in jeopardy at this point because of insurance companies denying me as a provider. So that's the main reason that I'm bringing this petition today. Blue Shield, Cigna, and Health Net have all denied me as a provider from their provider list. So that's 20 to 25%, I think, of the patients that come into my clinic, and I'm sure you guys are aware that they're individually credentialing now, not just the facility. So that's been a huge, huge problem. And it's been a burden on the other staff in my clinic, the other patient. I'm so sorry. I keep forgetting. It's a burden on other PTs in my clinic, and my productivity is going down, and they're getting overwhelmed. And I would love to be able to take some of the burden off them and see every patient, have the ability to see every patient that comes into our clinic. So, thank you.
All right, and Ms. Jump, you brought some documents here today. The board has been provided with a copy, as has the Deputy Attorney General. I'm going to go ahead and mark these documents collectively for identification as Exhibit A. Please tell the board what are these Exhibit A documents.
The first two are just my CPR. You know, since I've been on probation, I just didn't submit them with the petition, just to prove that I have had full coverage, of course, of CPR since college. But and then continue. And then the next two are two other courses I've completed since I turned in my petition packet. So just to complete my continuing education that you have access to. And then the last two, they're, I think, 3 pages for one, and then the last 2 pages are another. They're courses I'm signed up to take. So one is just actually a lecture I'm going to tomorrow night, and then the next one is a course for February. That's it.
All right. Mr. Bill, any objection to Exhibit A being admitted?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit A is admitted. All right. Mr. Bill, cross-examination?
Yes. Ms. Jump, you sustained your first DUI conviction in 2003, is that right?
No,
What
actually,
year
that's
was it?
not right. It was in 2005.
Oh, 2005, okay. The arrest was in 2003?
No, I think the incident was in 2005.
Oh, okay.
I have the exact date.
No, that's okay. Were you arrested on the date of the incident?
Yes.
And were you taken to jail?
Yes.
And did you had to pay a rather substantial fine for pleading guilty, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then your second alcohol-related issue occurred in 2011?
Yes.
Is that right? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. So the second arrest occurred in 2011, is
Yes.
that right? And then the conviction also occurred in 2011? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you sure about that?
I'm not sure of the dates exactly.
I believe
but,
it.
yeah.
It's in the packet. So I'm just wondering, after being arrested, paying a huge fine, going to jail, how did you let this happen a second time? What happened?
Yeah. You know, when I got my first DUI, I was young and stupid. I don't have any explanation. I was new to drinking, and I don't know if I fully understood how dangerous it was and what I was, you know, I was invincible, of course. I was in my 20s, young 20s, and I didn't fully understand all the consequences, I don't think. So after that, I did, to some degree. I mean, I think, you know, I understood the gravity of the situation, the gravity of driving under the influence of alcohol, how terrible that is to do, and the severity of the consequences involved. But I continued to drink, you know, intermittently in social settings. And what my plan is that I would drink but not drive, right? So I would plan, like I would go to an event where there's alcohol present, and I would cab or plan to stay the night or get a designated driver, be a designated driver, right? And that worked pretty well until 2011, when the second event occurred. And I failed to consider that when you drink alcohol, your judgment is impaired. And I failed to consider that when I drink alcohol, it's more difficult for me to make good choices. And that's what happened in 2011. I drank alcohol, and I made a poor choice. That's why, since these circumstances, and since being on probation and being able to really reflect on all this and my circumstances and my history, I've decided not to drink alcohol. That's the only sure way that I won't drive under the influence.
And then you signed the stipulation with the board in 2014, is that right?
Yes.
And between the date of conviction in 2011 and you signing the stipulation in 2014, did you drink during that period?
I did.
Okay.
Although I think throughout that time I drank probably less because my life changed. I went through some other life changes at that time where I moved to Long Beach and I broke up with a boyfriend and started dating a new boyfriend that is actually my fiance now, before that petition or before my probation went into effect. So I think, we tampered back our social activities throughout that period. But yes, I continued to drink.
Okay. Do you feel like you had a problem with drinking? Was that an issue in your life?
I think that I have abused alcohol. I think that I have drank too much or too often. I think that it's caused problems for me. I think that it has had a negative impact on my life. I think obviously with my 2 alcohol-related offenses and here being on disciplinary position with the board, it has definitely impacted my life, and I don't want to have that happen anymore. That's why I've decided to stop drinking.
And what caused you to abuse alcohol? Did you figure that out during your period of probation?
Yeah, I've always, I started drinking for social reasons, just to have fun. Started drinking in college, just to be out, meet people. That's what everyone was doing. I was just being part of the crowd and, part of the social activities, to be involved. And that's continuously what my drinking has been throughout, is just at social settings, at social events. That just kind of became kind of a normal thing, a normal part of life, a normal part of my social activities. You just go there's alcohol. Sure, I'll have a beer, It wasn't anything beyond that.
Okay, but you talked about you abused alcohol. Didn't you say that?
I think drinking, I have drank to excess on multiple occasions.
And what was the reason for that?
Not knowing when to stop.
Okay, so there was no, stress trigger or, issues going on in your life or whatever that
No.
motivated that? Okay. All right, and you talked about having less chaos in your personal life, which helps your abstinence. Is that right? I believe that's what you said.
I don't know if it helps my abstinence, but I think it helps my understanding and my being present in present.
Okay.
Being able to focus on other things. I think having my personal life kind of a little bit more honed in and, within boundaries that are easier to maintain. Sometimes, if you're drinking, things get a little chaotic sometimes. And I think that now I have my life in a better box where I don't have to, I don't know, it's easier for me to focus on the relationships in my life, and it's easier for me to focus on my career now, having a more stable life at home.
Okay. And then you said you attended AA for a period of time. How long was that?
I was in Maximus for that 30-day that 30-day assessment period, and I think I attended about 50 AA meetings throughout that time. I was in Maximus for the 30-day period, but really the 30 days turned into more like 50 days because it just takes time for them to do things. So I went to about 50 AA meetings.
Okay. And did you stop going to AA once you finished the Maximus program?
I did.
Okay. And when was that? What year?
2014.
2014, okay. Okay. Now, you spoke with your probation monitor about your petition. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall your probation monitor asking you what you had done to rehabilitate yourself? Do you
Yes.
recall that? And do you recall having difficulty answering that question?
I asked him to explain rehabilitation a little bit more. I got hung up on the word. To me, rehabilitation, I was thinking about it more like in terms of being in Maximus or in a facility that helps helps you overcome an addiction. And I didn't feel like I went through a rehabilitation program, so that's why I was confused. But I understand what he meant by that now. By rehabilitation, what changes have I made? How am I, not going to, have this ever happen again? I understand what it means now. The word rehab threw me when he asked me. Sorry.
It was a semantic issue
Yeah.
rather than...
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. I have nothing further.
We'll now have questions from the board, starting with Ms. Elby.
I have no questions.
Oh, I miss. No questions from you, Ms. Elby?
Oh,
Elby.
Come back to me.
Okay, and Dr. Alviso?
No questions.
Okay. And Dr. Drummer?
Good afternoon. Had to check that. Just a couple of questions. On the Maximus report that you provided, it says that you did not need to participate further because it was clinically inappropriate. What does that mean to you?
I understand Maximus to be a program that you're required to be to have a clinical dependence on alcohol to be admitted, and then so I assume that that's what they didn't find, that I had a clinical dependence on alcohol, or that I had an addiction issue that needed a program to overcome.
Okay. And so your decision to say that you need to stop drinking and that you've not had anything to drink since then is based on what exactly? What's in your mind about why you've made that? I mean, you've hinted at it a little bit, but...
Yeah. First of all, I don't want to put myself in a position where I would ever have a possibility of hurting other people. And I've already, been driving under the influence twice. And I don't want to allow that a possibility for a third time. I'm just not willing to take the risk. And, I'm not willing to put my job in jeopardy. I love what I do. It means so much to me. This job is everything. This is what I meant to do. And I don't want to jeopardize that. Beyond that, I think just my priorities are just totally different than they were before. When I was in my 20s, I was single. My social life was a high priority. I was new in my job. I was still wanting to go meet somebody. Now I'm in my 30s. I'm getting married this summer. I'm 34, so I need to start having kids soon. I want to be a mother, and I want to be a good mother. I want to be a responsible, morally upstanding mother that wouldn't make mistakes like that. And the only way I can ensure that is if I don't drink. And I've recognized that not having alcohol is much easier than I expected it would be. It's not as important as I thought it was. I'm going to all the same ball games and concerts and weddings and countless parties, and now they're 1-year-old birthday parties or so instead of the other parties I used to go to. But I'm doing all that without alcohol, and it's great. So I don't feel like I'm missing anything. I feel like I've developed a lot, and I feel like I've made a lot of positive changes in my life since I began probation, since I've been without alcohol, and I see no reason to go back.
Does your fiancé drink?
No. He stopped drinking along with me, and I think he feels the same way.
Thank you.
Dr. Dominguez?
Good afternoon,
Good
Ms.
afternoon.
Jump. Just sort of a follow-up question, I think, from on Dr. Drummer's point. I believe council asked you if you had continued going to AA meetings after the assessment period. And I think you said during that 30-day, or actually might have been even as long as 50 days, but since then you have not. I'm wondering if you could just tell me or us a little bit about what you took away from those 30 days of that assessment period.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I did first and foremost, it helped me to accept my circumstances, and that's huge because I want to be able to have peace about whatever circumstance I am in life, and and I think that's part of, actually I was driving here today and my dad called me and wanted to wish me luck. And he said, just pray for whatever God wants to happen will happen. And he's like, I find that whenever I say that, I just find a peace about the circumstance. Whatever happens will happen, and we just accept that circumstance. And I feel like I've kind of changed my mindset in that way of thinking. Like I've just, whatever happens, happens, and I'm just going to deal with it the best that I can. And there's nothing you can do. So you just have to have peace about it. And I think I've learned that from AA initially, and then, my dad helps here and there too. And church, he gets that from church. But I also really like that AA focuses on continual self-reassessment. I think that I've learned that as well. So you can always take another look at yourself and say, what can I change? What can I tweak? And I feel like I love doing that because it makes me feel better about myself, and it makes me feel more capable of then giving and helping others. So I've learned that from AA, I think, too, and I've incorporated other things in my life that continue to remind me of that.
Would it be fair to say that in reference to the two incidents that brought you here, you sort of at that point maybe didn't have control over those kinds of things, and now you sort of have found the ability to avoid, sort of going back to the, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that, like, I've already forgotten the saying, but I'm familiar with it. But do you know what I'm asking?
Not really. Like that I feel like I have the control now to change the things about myself and I didn't before? Is that what you're saying?
Right. So that in reference to the two incidents, did you feel like you did not have the control to say, this is not a good idea? I shouldn't be driving? But now I assume you do.
No, I think that I've known, like, since my first DUI, I've known that. I just didn't have the capability to execute because I put alcohol into my body, and you can't. Alcohol impairs my judgment. So I don't know that I didn't have the capability of making changes to myself. I just didn't implement daily reminders, which I think are helpful. And I love driving to work. It takes me about 30 or 40 minutes to drive to work, and now I put that time to good use. So I love it. I get in my car, and before I started, put up one of those audio books or like TED Talks or something and drive, and I learn something on the way to work, or I free focus my day, and it's great. And I didn't have that before. I don't know, I just didn't think about it, and now I think about it.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Rabina Ahmed, any questions? Okay, and Mr. Watkins?
I've got a few questions.
Okay.
I'm trying to, and maybe you can help me. You speak about, control being very important to you. And then you speak simultaneously about relinquishing the control, right? So your primary motivation for coming here, you indicated, was because you feel your job is in jeopardy. And there's a lot of fear attached to that. So it's by coming here again, assuming control over something, that you could potentially say, could it disrupt my life? And obviously, being a PT in a professional manner, that you may fear too. Do you understand that?
I think coming here and asking for an early termination in order to make my circumstances at work better is taking control of the things that I can. That's what is in my control, to come here and ask. And then if you say no, then I have to accept the circumstances and try to, find a job if I lose my job, or deal with the circumstances then that are presented. But I think this is I think that you do need to do all those things. I think taking control of what you can. So there are things in your life that you can take control over and that you can change. And I want to do that. And then the things that I cannot control, understand that I can't control them and find peace with that. Is that?
Yeah. Also, 50 AA meetings, you get this insight, and then you get the affirmation from the Maximus program that says, no problem. Do you walk away ever thinking that, alcohol is a potential hazard in my life? Do you walk around with something like that on your mind?
No.
Do you never walk into a any event where you feel that is, if I touch this, there'll be a problem?
No, I don't even really think about it, honestly. Like, I go to a party and I don't even know that there's alcohol there. I don't even see it. It doesn't exist in my life anymore. I'm not fearful of it. Alcohol can exist. Not everybody has a problem the way I have a problem, that I've demonstrated I have problems. So I'm not afraid of alcohol. I choose not to take part.
Can you explain to me, this is probably my primary question.
Yeah.
I have my life in a better box. It's very restrictive, and I would like to know what that box looked like when you did not have a better box.
I don't know, maybe that was poor wording, but I don't think that my life is in a box, but I just mean like I have stuff together. I have it together more. That's what I mean. Like it's, I lost my phone like 3 years in a row, like left it in the cab, things like that. Like now I don't have to go hunt for my phone because I lost it in a bar. I just have my ducks in a row better. And I think that you don't get out of bed hungover. Not that happened often, but sometimes, and now never. So that's better. I guess that's what I mean. Just like alcohol causes disorder in my life. It caused disorder in my life. And maybe not to a huge degree, but to a degree enough that I don't want it anymore. And that I've learned through the reflection of looking back on my circumstances that I prefer stability. And I prefer less chaos, I prefer more order.
As in more control, order.
I guess. The thing that I can change.
Would you still be drinking if you were never caught right now?
If I never got my second conviction?
DUI.
Probably. I wouldn't have had a reason to look at it. So this I guess, it was a probation, and these whole circumstances have been a blessing in disguise. I didn't think so at the beginning, but they have definitely been a blessing in disguise. I think these events were the catalyst for change in my life, and I think it's been good for me. It's been positive.
Thank you.
Ms. McMillan.
Hi.
Hi.
First, I want to commend you for staying on the journey that you're on. It sounds like you're getting a ton of enlightenment and self-improvement. So I'd like to say that first. You have referenced multiple times about accepting your circumstances, but you're saying it kind of in a general way. Has there been a circumstance outside of sitting here at this table right now where it's impacted you really hard, where you had to really make a decision, a conscious decision not to drink? Has anything happened?
Since probation?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to answer that. I feel like I haven't chosen. Choosing to drink alcohol hasn't been an option on probation. I'm not supposed to drink. I'm not going to drink. I'm a very disciplined person, and my terms of probation are not drinking. I have to do biological fluid testing, and if I tell myself, I've always been one of those people that can stick to a diet, can exercise daily. I have no problem incorporating healthy habits. That's how I am. I'm a very disciplined person. So I've never been like, oh gosh, should I drink? No, let's not. My plan is to not. So I haven't come across a circumstance since I've been on probation where I've had to make that choice. Mm-hmm. I mean, every time I make a choice, I don't know, I think everything you put into your body is a choice. That's why I'll never oops, I took a drink. I hold something, a piece of food or drink in my hand, and you have to make a choice before you put it inside your mouth. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to say, no, I'm not going to make that choice. My answer is no. and then put it back down, So it's same not eating chocolate or something. It's like, to me, it's like kind of the same thing. So I'm choosing to not drink. And
So my concern is, I think kind of what TJ was saying, it does sound like you have placed yourself in this box. And it concerns me that what can happen, what can come along and shake that box up.
I don't feel like I'm in, my life is wide open. I think there's tons of possibilities for me. I'm not limiting myself from doing anything because I'm not drinking. I'm going to everything that I would normally go to. Just my life has changed to some degree, so my activities are a little bit different maybe than they used to be. But, like maybe going to a bar I actually still go to a bar. I watch football games at bars sometimes, but I don't, so I'm still doing everything that I would normally do. I'm still going to concerts, and I'm still going to parties, and I have been a book club with my girlfriends. I do that. It's a box with an open top. I don't know. I don't know if I've used a poor word analogy, I guess, but
I get it, because that's kind of what I want to hear you say. You're very comfortable in a setting that has people drinking, alcohol, everything. I'm still a little concerned. You're going to be getting married soon. That's a very stressful process when people are planning weddings and folks are going to be are you going to have champagne toasts and all of that?
It's my choice not to drink, not all my guests' choice.
Okay. And you had mentioned that in the past, when you were drinking a lot, that you knew how to reach out and get a designated driver and all of that. But when you were arrested, you were driving with you didn't have a valid driver's license.
It had just expired, and I had intended to go to the DMV, but I just hadn't had a chance. It had expired like the week prior, but, not that I should have been more on top of that, but I wasn't, like, driving for an extended period on an expired license. It had just expired. But stressors have never been the cause of my drinking. I have stress all the time. I'm like one of those crazy stress monkey people. I think stress can be a good thing. It can encourage you to do more and be more productive. I think that it depends on how you channel your stress. And I think generally I channel my stress very healthily. And if I don't, it comes out as a headache or, poor sleeping. Like last night I didn't get so much sleep, but it comes out like that. I've never drank because of some horrible upheaval in my life or some horrible event. It's always been in a fun circumstance with social gatherings, and I can go to social gatherings now and not drink, and I'm happy and totally comfortable.
So I see you do kickboxing.
I do.
So is that one of the ways that you release your stress?
Sure. I exercise every day. I go to the gym, I kickbox, I run. I used to bodybuild. I don't know if you knew that from my old stuff. But I used to bodybuild. I love exercise, and I think that probably helps a lot. Take a lot of the stress out of my life. It gives me something to focus on. I think it's a good, healthy habit.
Thank you. Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you. And I wish you luck with your wedding.
Thank you.
I have no questions. Anything further, Mr. Bill?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Then with that, the record is closed. The matter is submitted and will be decided by the board in closed session. We're off the record.
Closing statement?
Oh.
Sorry, you're all hungry.
That's okay. No. Okay. I apologize. I have to take closing statements from the parties. Okay, so we're going to reopen the record. And Mr. Bill, you didn't have anything further?
Nothing further.
Okay. Did you wish to give a closing statement?
I do, actually.
Go ahead.
I thought somebody would ask a question about this, but I actually have a few other just reasons that I would like to have an early release of probation. So the insurance company is the main thing, but let me just quickly, I've also been unable to pursue additional work and volunteer work that has been presented to me. I used to do home health back in the day before all this occurred, and this has been financially burdensome, and I would have loved to add some supplement to my income, some supplement to what I currently do. And so I would add home health if that was not a restriction. Also, I've looked into working at skilled nursing facilities, but they on Saturdays, and they don't. I wouldn't be able to have a supervisor, so that's something I'm unable to do as well. And the kickboxing place that I work out at, and I work there periodically too. I've talked to the owner there about doing, some screenings or some evaluations of clients sometimes, because they always come to me and ask stuff anyway. So I thought that would be a great way for me to volunteer my time, and I'm unable to do that, again, with my probationary terms. And it also limits me in my career advancement and with my educational pursuits. I've been wanting to get my OCS, and you have to have a license that's unrestricted in order to sit for that exam. So that's on hold as well, and I would love to be able to do that, kind of take my education to the next level. And then to a lesser degree, just my own emotional and personal reasons just to move forward in my life and get married and have it kind of be a clean slate for me. So I wanted to just mention that too. So thank you for your time and the opportunity to come here today. Again, I think I've made significant changes in my life, and I'm a completely different person. I'm more mature, I'm more focused, and I'm more stable. And I am certain that this will never happen again. I simply refuse to put myself in a situation where that's possible. So I appreciate the opportunity. I would be incredibly grateful to be granted an early termination of probation. Thank you for your time.
Anything further from the board members?
Actually, I do have something. How are your terms preventing you from pursuing opportunities at the kickboxing gym?
I would have to have a supervisor or another PT with me.
Got it. Thanks.
All right, now that nothing further, the record is now closed. The matter is submitted and will be decided by the board in closed session. We're off the record.
At this time, we're going to go into closed session and recess for lunch.